Rhymes, it lives in interesting times. Freedom, you say you want it here and now. Well, that's okay, please tell me how that's freedom. Freedom, what do you know about freedom? Where do you go without freedom? What were you taught about freedom? Have you ever been caught without freedom? Perhaps it is not what you think it means.
Councilmember Mayall, Councilmember Qureshi, Councilmember Siemens, present. Councilmember Smith, here. Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Gosh,
all
loud.
right. Yeah, sorry.
Very volatile.
I'm going to turn you off now. Great. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. This is our first meeting since the end of July. I'm glad to see everyone back again. A great deal has happened since last July. I just want to acknowledge that even though we were not here for our regular Wednesday night meetings, the council worked with the staff and with residents throughout the month, and just want to recognize that our thoughts are with those in Houston, those in the Virgin Islands right now, in Puerto Rico, and the rest of the world that will have to deal with Irma soon, those impacted by the president's DACA decision, and those impacted, as we all have been, by the things that took place in Charlottesville. So a lot has happened since we've last been together, and we have a busy fall ahead of us. In September and October, we'll have about 8 meetings before our city election. We have a lot to get done with this council before the election time, so hope everybody's ready to get back to work. And with that, I'll just go through our agenda over the next couple of weeks. Tonight's agenda, there's no changes to it. Next week, the City Council will be meeting in a closed session before our regular public meeting at 7:30. We are going to be meeting with our city attorney to receive legal advice related to the Safe Grow ordinance and the lawsuit that's happening at the county level. When we convene for our public meeting at 7:30, we will have a voting session. We'll be voting on the second reading ordinance regarding the 2017 city elections. Our work sessions will consist of a request for payment in lieu of taxes for Montgomery Housing Partnership for 7667 Maple Avenue and Victory Housing for 666 and 6076 Houston Avenue. Our other work session is a continued discussion of the selection of a development partner for the Tacoma Park Recreation Center on New Hampshire Avenue. And the other discussion we'll have is a discussion of the proposal to rename selected street names in the city. So that will be Wednesday, September 13th. On Wednesday, September 20th, our voting session will consist of a resolution establishing a youth council and the first reading ordinance amending the city code regarding special traffic regulations, and what that ordinance will be determined by our work session tonight regarding bikes on sidewalks. Our work session that evening will be a discussion of legislative priorities, a discussion of proposed amendment to the city code regarding district facade regulations, a discussion of city and county vacant property laws, and we have tentatively scheduled a discussion of proposed amendment to rental housing law clarifying the status of Airbnbs. Let's see, and then on Wednesday, September 27th, we'll have tentatively scheduled a voting session resolution selecting a development partner for the Tacoma Park Recreation Center on New Hampshire Avenue, the second reading ordinance amending the city code regarding specific traffic regulations, tentatively scheduled the first reading ordinance authorizing the execution of the pilots, and tentatively a resolution providing for committee reappointments. On September 27th, our work session will be a presentation of the concept plans from our development partner for the Tacoma Junction redevelopment. So that'll take us through the end of September. Now we'll turn to public comments. First, we'll have public comments on our voting items this evening. The first voting item we have is the first reading ordinance regarding the 2017 city elections. So if you have any public comments regarding that, please come to the podium. You have 3 minutes for public comments on that item. Any public comments on the city election ordinance? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the second. The next is a single reading ordinance awarding a contract for lobbying services at the county level. Yep,
Good evening. For the record, my name is Paul D'Estachio, 19 Pine Avenue in Ward 3. As you all know, we have a city election coming up soon, and we have lots of rhetoric going on about what a great progressive city we are and how we go through, we make sure that we have an economically diverse city. And there's lots and lots and lots of that kind of stuff going through my email box. I'm waiting for somebody to send me just one line. And that one line is, I promise that I'm not going to do something stupid with your money over the next 2 or 3 years in this particular case. Which brings me to the $20,000 that we're planning on spending on a consulting contract. We have, best of my knowledge, not 1, not 2, but 3 county council members who are City of Tacoma Park residents, one of whom likely will be county executive after the next election. We have a 4th county council member who lives within spitting distance of the city border. And you're telling me that we can't pick up the phone and say, hey, Mark, this is a problem. Or we aren't on their email list so we know what's going on? We talk about economic diversity, and then we spend a bunch of money. Right now, the taxes, property taxes on my house and lot are pushing $15,000 a year. I'm 65 years old. I'd like to retire sometime. $15,000 out of pocket every year going up. That's, by the way, 3 times what I paid when I bought that property. We're running people out of the city. I can't afford to live in this city unless I have a job. And yet we're going to spend $20,000? After we spent how many $100,000 on a dog park that was supposed to be for free? After we spent how many millions of dollars on cost overruns on this building, cost overruns on Flower Avenue? I think this council needs to go back to the basics. Look at how much we spend on interest, on bonding. I can't afford to live in this city anymore. I'm going to sell my house because I can't spend $15,000. $15,000 is minimum wage for a full year without taxes.
Thank
I know.
you.
The council would like me to shut up, so I will. Think about it. This $20,000 is basically
Thank you.
a
Your
waste
time is up this
of
evening.
the city council, of the city taxpayers' money.
Thank you.
And we need to
Would
stop
anyone else
and
like
think
to comment
about
on
that.
the single reading
and we
ordinance?
we talk
Thank
about
you.
making
Please-
sure our citizens are heard, and
Please
then
be
we shut them up.
respectful of everyone else who is here this evening and would like to speak.
I know. Mr. D'Estachio, you haven't lived in the city long
Please.
enough. Shut up.
Would someone else please like to speak to the single reading ordinance awarding a contract for lobbying services at the county level? If not, we'll move on to general public comments. All right, now we'll move on to general public comments. Yeah, it's general public comments now. We'll get the microphone to Mr. Lovelace. You can go ahead, Ms. Taddeo. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Lovelace.
Okay, this is Mr. Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate. Just want to bring a few short things to your mind. One of them is I want to thank Mayor Stewart and the city council for giving me a lot of flowers. And that glass face was so beautiful when I was in the hospital in July. You guys did really good for me. I was in the hospital for 4 or 5 days because my air conditioning gave out, and it caused my condition to come back in full force. I couldn't hold food or water down for a week. And I couldn't, I started having problems with my heart again. I just wanted to tell everybody it made the cardiac unit smell so beautiful, so everybody knows what kind of a beautiful mayor and city council we have. Thank you very much. Also, I want to bring to your attention that I thought we had a ban on styrofoam in the city. The Washington Adventist Hospital, unfortunately, when I had some ice chips brought to me, they brought them in a styrofoam cup. They're using styrofoam over there, and as far as I know, the hospital is supposed to be a promoter of good health and well-being. So we got to get on them to abolish their styrofoam habit, and get on them quick. Don't be nasty to them, but just let them know that it's a serious problem in our environment. It never decomposes, it does not rot, so it'll always be in our environment forever. So we got to do everything we can to stop it. It's also toxic to people and animals and everything else. People do get sick from that and land in the hospital where they get more styrofoam. So I just want to bring it to your attention. Also, I want to bring to your attention about the people in Charlottesville, the lady in Charlottesville who got killed using her freedom of speech for all our good. Because that could have been me, and it damn near was me, and it still could be me if my condition gets worse. I want to thank everybody out there for what you've done for me, and I want to ask people out there to come to the Folk Festival on the 10th. I don't know if I'll make it, but I'd love to make it. And I want to bring to your attention that it's the epitome of Tacoma Park, the high point in Tacoma Park, because Tacoma Park made that folk festival, and that shows us what Tacoma is really about. So please, come out in full force to our Tacoma Park Folk Festival. I want to tell you that we had a good demonstration yesterday on the DACA program. We don't want to see that go. We're doing everything we can to preserve that. We don't want to see any more deportations. Please, Donald Trump, have a heart. Stop it. And do everything we can to stop it. And I want everybody to start coming out to our demonstrations. Even if you voted for Trump, if you don't agree with him, get up and stand up for our rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lovelace. Any other public comments this evening?
Okay, good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Julie Taddeo from Ward 2, and I'm also co-founder of Safe Grow Montgomery. So I want to first say thank you to outgoing council members Tim Mayle, who's not here tonight, and to Fred Schultz. Fred, you listened so carefully to our concerns when we were putting the law together. I'll always remember those days in the cafes and stuff, and so thank you for your thoughtful input and for saying yes to the law in the first place. And thanks to Tim and obviously Seth Grimes, who helped to write the law. 2 years ago, the former head of the EPA, who I now miss dearly, was in this very auditorium, and she praised the Safe Grow law. She also championed further local action for communities to protect their environment. Now more than ever, we need local action, especially with the EPA, and it's being defunded and research is being stripped away. I'm not here to argue the science behind the justification of the Safe Grow law. That was done 5 years ago, and it was agreed to by a unanimous vote of the council and the mayor at the time. The science was accepted by the Montgomery County Council when they passed their Healthy Lawns Act last year. Thanks to that law, we now have fewer pesticides on public property throughout the county, as well as our playgrounds, which are essential. And both laws, the city and the county, have an education mandate that stays in place no matter what the outcome of the appeal is. And regardless of the county's appeal, that mandate will stay in place, and I hope we'll continue with the education and outreach efforts. Our law is far from perfect. It has loopholes. Some residents have complained about violations by lawn care companies because the penalty is such a small fine. that they can get away with it. But once they apply a restricted pesticide, the damage is done to neighboring kids, pets, and bees. So as we move forward and welcome new council members on this dais, I hope that there will be a continuing commitment to the law to protect and to uphold it. The environmental code enforcer who was hired works to enforce all of our city's environmental laws, not just Safe Grow. And since 2013, anyone can look at past budgets and see that this law has never cost what it was allotted in the original budget. And there's so many cheap, inexpensive, and fun ways, especially through social media, like with the photo contest, to spread the word. Thank you, Mayor, for the bee-friendly bee seed packets and those beautiful, beautiful bus shelters on Maple Avenue. All right, I just want to end by saying that the lawsuit that is going on right now against the county, and which is now reaching the appeal stage, is not led by private residents. It is led by Scott's, True Green, and RISE, which is the pesticide lobbying group, who were here when we were trying to pass our law. They sat in this audience as well. Outside interests are intent on taking away local communities' rights. Just as we are resisting outside forces to defend our status as a sanctuary city, we must keep this town a sanctuary from the threat of pesticide lobbyists who peddle their poisons, not for our benefit, but for their own.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mary Rooker. I'm from Ward 2, and I rise in support of the Safe Grow ordinance here in the city of Tacoma Park. The pesticide lobby, as Julie said, is behind the attack on the county law, and I understand why, but I respectfully disagree with them. And I have urged the county council to stand firm in protecting the health of Montgomery County residents, and I invite you to do the same tonight. I stand here to support you in standing strong on our city ordinance. I'm proud of our city council, and the only change I'd like to see to the Safe Grow ordinance would be those made to strengthen it. So thank you so much. I'm glad to live in the city of Tacoma Park.
Hi, council, mayor, city manager, and good to see all of you this evening. I'm Pat Rumbaugh, the Play Lady from Ward 1. I'd like to invite you all to Let's Play Tacoma Week, which is the first time we're ever having this, planning it, and hopefully it'll be a fun week. Maybe you've seen this flyer around town, everyone. It's on the kiosk and I believe every bulletin board in town. It was created by our summer youth employment person, only 16 years old. And she just got into the program where she can study her dream, graphic design and video, on our website. And I believe Councilmember Kovar passed out our schedule for Let's Play Tacoma Week. I hope you will. How you can help us is first if you can come, and if you can share it on listservs as much as possible. Invite a neighbor that might not be on a listserv, a super senior, tell people about it. And lastly, you can order, if you're interested, Where We Live, Communities for All Ages, 100+ inspiring ideas from America's community leaders. Our mayor is mentioned in here. It's really humbling and rewarding for AARP to choose us, Tacoma Park, as one of the 100 community leaders. So hope you had a great August. Hope to see everybody at Let's Play Tacoma Week. Oh, lastly, who plays chess here besides Council Member Kovar? I'm looking for chess players. You don't have to be on the council. Okay. I may be calling you. All right. Thanks so much for all that you do. Oh, and thank the Recreation Department for co-sponsoring the Play Day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Kelly. I'm just going back to the Safe Grow subject, and I just have one maybe obvious thing to point out, but I don't use pesticides anymore for many years because all you have to do is search online for alternatives, and there are a lot of natural, non-chemical alternatives that you can use on your lawn and in your garden. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart, council members, Jesse, Susie. My name is Ashley Nugent. I live at 6806 Belford Drive. I am here as a passionate supporter of Safe Grow. I am also here on behalf of some of my neighbors who are unable to attend because of obligations to their children. I suggested that they watch on TV because Wednesday night council meetings are prime time TV in the Nugent household. Just a bad joke to be made. Anyways, on Belford Drive alone, we have about 10 children, and Safe Grow is very important to us and those children. It protects our children, our future children, our animals, some of our bees. We could have more bees, and more. On a personal note, I very recently had a family member pass away due to cancer, and it has been very strong. Sorry, it's a little emotional. It has been very strongly suggested that his death was due to pesticides being applied on his lawn for many decades. So I appreciate the council passing this law, and going forward, I hope that you would remain strong advocates in protecting the health of our lawns and our children and our friends and our families and our animals and our bees. So thank you very much.
Love it.
Hi, council members. I'm Tammy Giral, Ward 6. I'm also a teacher at Blair High School. And I'm here with my son, Aiden, and we are fervent supporters of the Safe Grow Zone. We were here 2 years ago. Aiden was much younger, and he spoke to you all, or not to you all, but some of you. And many children came out to speak. And we are very, very concerned that this Safe Grow Zone initiative and ordinance will be rescinded. It's a big concern. We know Tacoma Park is, very unique and wonderful, and in this way as well. And we are in the front, pioneers in this area, and we wouldn't want that to change in any way. So the stronger the better. I agree with the woman who spoke earlier. And Julie, can't thank you enough for all the work that you and Catherine have done. And thank you, all of you as well, for supporting it. So I'm just praying that we still have it. Thank you. Aiden, do you want to say something?
I'm 12 years old, and my friends and I and other children my age think that pesticide has a negative impact on the environment, and it can destroy wildlife, and it's just bad for children's health and other things. So yeah.
So hi, I'm Cindy DeBella, Elm Avenue, Ward 2. This has turned into a Ward 2 party here. It's great. And on Safe Grow, all that. So I'm speaking as a private citizen today. I just want to make that perfectly clear to everybody. You've heard from me before on this issue because I've been co-chair of the Environment Committee for 4 years. And FYI, the Committee on the Environment has on its agenda for its next meeting to discuss this issue and address any questions the council might have. We were one of the many partners in developing the original ordinance, and we were pushing for the environmental officer, I completely agree, to help educate and implement this ordinance, and that'll continue regardless of what happens. But I want to make it clear, I personally support a strong Safe Grow ordinance in the city. I understand you'll be hearing from council next week on whether and how the city ordinance will be affected. And I urge you to consider their advice and then to do what's best to protect the city law and continue to educate residents in the city. When we're beyond this, I look forward to us considering a simple bee-friendly amendment to address cosmetic applications of neonicotinoids. I practiced that and it still didn't work. To adopting a public notification procedure for pesticide applications on city properties, and you've heard from me on that too. And 3, evaluating our policies for when, where, and whether pesticides are applied on city properties. So thank you for letting me speak as a private citizen, And is there anybody else on Safe Grow? Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor Stewart and council members. I'm here to talk about bikes on the sidewalks issue. I just had a little small consult with Casey, and she suggested that I just go ahead and talk about it right now. I live on Belford Drive in Ward 2, and my mother was almost killed when I was 4 years old in a bike accident. So bike safety is incredibly important to me. Finding safe roadways for bicyclists, having protection for them is incredibly important. At the same time, I have a sister with an intellectual disability and who has a very difficult time with mobility. Oftentimes when we're walking on hills or places with cracks, I'll hold her hand. If it's raining, I'll hold her hand. If it's snowing, I'll hold her hand. And I'm very concerned about the idea of introducing bikes to our streets, to our sidewalks, especially in Ward 2. We have a number of streets that only have one sidewalk or no sidewalks, and I get very concerned about the idea of bicyclists going two ways towards one another. I see in the proposed code giving an audible signal. I don't think that my sister would be able to register that on time. I also know that people with hearing disabilities would not be able to register that at all. I work with a number of people with disabilities. I'm a disability civil rights lawyer. And they tell me all the time that the bane of their existence is bicyclists on sidewalks. This is not a bicyclist versus car issue where people are trying to figure out where they are on the road. This is truly people who feel that they're having enough trouble navigating the sidewalk with pedestrians, and I'm very concerned about introducing bikes onto the sidewalk. If this is something that the council is considering, I want to make sure that this is done as safely as possible. I notice on Elm, for example, I oftentimes get out of the sidewalk myself just walking by someone because we're not going to be able to cross paths. So generally, I will just cede the way to that person. And I just don't really quite understand, based on this, what that procedure would look like. And I just really encourage the council to consider people with disabilities. I'm here with Mary Jane, who's a member of POSNA, my wife Ashley, who's also a member of POSNA, parents of special needs adults, and we really need to make sure that when the council's making decisions that we're being respectful of people with disabilities, young children who might not be able to respond to bicyclist instructions, and just making sure that everyone's safe. I'm not an expert in this issue, but I've also looked at data, and I haven't really seen convincing information that bicyclists actually are more safe on the sidewalk. I think there could be problems with motorists not even seeing them as being members of the street, just not paying attention to them. So just please watch out for these important people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I press this button?
Nope.
I guess not. Hi, I'm Marty Ittner, and I'm from Ward 5, and I want to echo the sentiments of everyone who's spoken about the Safe Grow initiative, especially Judy Taddeo. And it's obvious that the chemical companies have lawyered up while we were thinking that we had, solved this issue and we're moving on to other things. So I just also want to say that I am very proud to live in Tacoma Park. It is working, and keep up the good fight against the chemical companies. Thank you.
Love it.
Arthur David Olson, Hancock Avenue. Welcome back. On bicycles on sidewalks. I don't drive and I don't ride, I walk. A couple of years ago, after a city council meeting, I was nearly run down by a city council member riding their bike on the sidewalk. If that's what happens when our most responsible residents, and it's illegal, I hate to think what will happen if it's legal for everyone. It's already legal for cyclists to use the sidewalk. If they feel a stretch of road is dangerous, they can dismount, get on the sidewalk, and walk their bike. I understand the cyclist's desire to go faster than walking, but it's precisely such speed and the difference in speed with pedestrians that makes collisions both likelier and more damaging. I've heard the idea that whether or not it's actually safer for cyclists to use sidewalks, we should let them do so if they feel safer. I hope this same consideration can be given to walkers. I, for one, feel safer when cycling on sidewalks is illegal. Providing sidewalks as a safe haven for cyclists will mean that walkers have no safe haven. I've also heard the idea that Tacoma Park should change its law because of a bad new Maryland law about cyclists' right-of-way. Tacoma Park is a nuclear-free sanctuary city that lets 16-year-olds vote. We're not in the habit of kowtowing to the bad practices of larger governments. I believe the better response here is to lobby for a change in the law. Tacoma Park prides itself on being a walkable city. I hope that in your efforts to increase cyclist safety, you do not make the city less walkable. Thank you.
Since we're talking about bikes on sidewalks, Paul DeStasio, 19 Pine Avenue. Just for the record, I've been on the board of directors of the Washington Area Bicyclists Association for about 20 years. I'm currently the president of the board of directors. I walked down here tonight. I usually would have ridden. I probably ride about 7,000 miles a year. With regard to the safety of bicycles on the street versus the sidewalk, statistically, cyclists are actually safer on the street, although the statistics basically are really pretty poor. Kids tend to ride on sidewalks. Kids tend to have lots more accidents. There's relatively few. The number of incidents on bicycles and cycling accidents that are actually accurately reported is pretty scant. So the statistics are actually not really very good. The Washington Area Bicyclists Association, and I'm not speaking for WABA, by the way, as a private citizen here, point of view generally is less legislation is better. More education is better. We try to educate people. I mean, we sum it up in saying, if you're going to ride, don't be a jerk. And that is absolutely true. It's a difficult situation. I would urge the council to, first of all, separate wheelchairs from bicycles. They're very, very different means of transportation. Generally, I think that cyclists are safer. Educated, trained cyclists are safer in the street than they are on the sidewalk because streets are designed for that speed. I think that you have to concede or recognize that an 8-year-old is probably safer on the sidewalk than in the street. You might want to consider age limits or an age cutoff. I'm not really honestly expressing a strong opinion as to how this should shake out, but it's a complicated issue and it's an important issue. It's not something to take lightly. As a cyclist, I want to see people ride safely. It's a very legitimate means of transportation. I use it probably 3 times as many miles a year on a bicycle as I do in a car. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Currier. I'm in Ward 1 on Holly Avenue. Thank you, Peter Cohorn, for putting this on our pen list. Appreciate it. I'm a hard of hearing person, and it is enormously gratifying to hear somebody on a bike, if they want to pass me, if they say, on your left or on your right, because I can't hear them approaching in terms of wheels on the surface. If that's something that can be trained into whoever is licensed to ride a bike on the pavement, I'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Great. Any other?
Hi, everybody. Mary Jane Machuy, Ward 2. I don't see Tim here. Darn. Can't give him a hard time today. Anyways, thank you, everybody, for coming here in such rainy weather, and I hope you all had good summers, okay? and have even better falls. I'm here, I'm the founder of Parents of Special Needs Adults, as Francis just said, thank you, but I'm not here necessarily as what I say is for POSNA, because we're all very different and independent, and our children are all very different and different needs. But one thing I'd really like to point out is the housing problem here. My ex-husband, who we're still friends with, is from Kenya, whose English isn't the best in the world. He has been 2 years on the waiting list, HSC waiting list. He was, before I met him, was shot in the head, so he has some neurological damage. That man has tried to, and he went the other day to HSC office in Silver Spring, and they had the nerve to tell him, we can't help you. He went to register, because every year you have to register to stay on the list. They said, we can't help you. You have to go online and find a computer. I couldn't believe it, so I got on the phone and started calling them. They put me on hold for 10 minutes, and then they said, well, leave a message, and then they put me onto voicemail. And I want to let you all know who thinks there's affordable housing in Tacoma Park, anywhere in Montgomery County, it's a lie. And it's really, really a big problem. And a lot of the problem, too, is, as was pointed out the gentleman earlier who might have to sell his house, I have friends, I didn't know about there's programs to help you, but they don't help you so much, and I have helped 2 older African-American women, so friends of mine on the block who who qualified, did not know nothing about these things, nothing, because they aren't on the internet. These are older women. They don't know. I mean, they deserve to get to know, but I'm the one who told them, and it shouldn't have been me. It should have been the city. And I feel sad about it. And more people are maybe just giving up, like this man here, because they don't know. And it's not just the taxes that are high, everything's high. And I want to put a shout out for Middle Eastern, because they're the cheapest place in town to have decent food. And I want to shout out to them and all the people who are low income. And please, a really quick thing, please clean up your acorns and other rolling objects in front of your sidewalks, please. I had to go into the street on Boyd Avenue to avoid them. Some house had some kind of rolling nuts or something. So please keep your sidewalks cleared. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Machui. Any other public comments this evening? No? All right, now we're going to hear, if that's the, are there? No, I know who these folks are. Sorry, it's okay. I got it. This is our Safe Roadways Committee, and they asked to have a little extra time because we're going to talk about bikes on sidewalk to address the council. So we decided to do it at the end of public comments because it might get late and they may want to go home. So or stay, but it's all yours.
Great, thank you. I'm Casey Kostick. I live in Ward 3, and I'm chair of the Safe Roadways Committee.
I'm Catherine Phillips. I live in Ward 4, and I am chair of the Safe Roadways Committee.
Yes, yes. This is one of our announcements tonight. Is I am resigning from the Safe Roadways Committee, and Kate.
And I'm taking
yes,
over.
Kate has very graciously agreed to step up, and I think will do a fantastic job of leading the committee in the future. So we want to talk a little bit about the bikes on sidewalks discussion, the work session that the council will have later tonight. I want to first take a minute just to thank the members of the public who spoke today about their concerns. This is definitely something that the committee has discussed a lot, and that we have had a lot of similar concerns, and I know it's something that the council has also discussed, and a lot of the similar concerns have come up. So we definitely recognize that this is not a cut and dried issue. It's not something that's simple. There's not an easy answer. Nonetheless, our recommendation is that the City Council should remove sections 131640 and 131650 from the municipal code. Doing so would remove archaic language regarding coasting and skating, as well as eliminate the restriction on biking on sidewalks. And thus, the removal of this section would then allow people to bike on sidewalks as per Montgomery County Code, which does allow biking on sidewalks. Just briefly here, want to call attention to the Montgomery County Code. And At the beginning there, it states that bicycles are allowed on sidewalks except in specific situations in the judgment of the county executive where it is necessary for the control or safety of pedestrians or others. And then I also want to note the clause that says, whenever any person is riding upon a sidewalk, such person shall give an audible signal and yield the right-of-way to any pedestrian. So under this code, pedestrians would have the right-of-way, and bicycles would be required to give right-of-way to pedestrians. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the impacts of this and why the municipal code should be changed to allow biking on sidewalks. First of all, as was mentioned earlier, it would protect people on bikes when they're in marked crosswalks. As many of you know, there was a teenager killed in a crosswalk in northern Montgomery County who did not receive any protection from the law as a result of the lack of protection in the state law at the time. So there will be a new state law going into effect on October 1st that will give the same protections to bikers as walkers when they are in crosswalks. However, it appears that the law will only apply if local law allows bicycles on sidewalks. So we feel that it is important to provide this protection to bicyclists who are in Takoma Park when they're in a crosswalk. And if the law is not changed in Takoma Park, that protection will not be given. Another outcome would be that we feel it would encourage more people to bike. Some barriers to biking, according to national surveys, are a perception of lack of safety and a concern about traffic. So allowing new and inexperienced bikers who may be not as good at biking yet, they may not be able to bike at a faster speed, they may not be comfortable understanding where cars are going and what's happening on the streets. Allowing them to, in selected situations, bike on the sidewalks when they feel the need to, and hopefully when there are very limited or no pedestrians there, would allow them to gain that experience and hopefully graduate to being more comfortable in biking on the streets. Kate, if you want to take over.
Sure. One of the things we want to do with this change is also see a more racially equitable system. Although the police don't currently issue citations, there's no guarantee that an officer won't. Research shows that people of color have different barriers to biking and using bike share systems than white folks. Fear of being racially profiled and stopped by police, fear of being a victim of a crime or target of police harassment while biking. And the imbalance of the police department it does not favor African Americans or Latinos who are more likely to be stopped by the police. The lack of enforcement also does not protect African Americans who are more likely to be victims of police force. And bike laws enforced are overwhelmingly upon people of color. Safety for children and family biking. Children are slower and less experienced bikers, and biking on busy streets is not safer for younger children. I live on Ritchie Avenue. We have a ton of kids, all of whom ride bicycles on the sidewalk because it's not safe to do so on the single sidewalk it's not safe to do so on the roadway because we have traffic calming and high traffic through to the Maple Avenue apartment complexes over trying to use that street as a route to get to Piney Branch. Families will not be able to bike together unless the code changes and allows for both adults and children to bike on sidewalks where it's more feasible. Align the code with the practice and reduce the confusion. The Takoma Park police are not enforcing violations. This creates confusion and dissonance at best. Allowing some people to bike on sidewalks creates a seamless allowing all people to bike on sidewalks creates a seamless transition between Takoma Park and other jurisdictions as well. Bike share stations and most bike racks are located on sidewalks, and therefore we are protecting those people as well. And we have some frequently asked questions that we felt that would be good to bring up. We know that you guys don't typically ask questions during this point, so this is kind of to cover what you might ask and what the public might ask and keep the number of follow-on down and make sure they understand where our approach is.
Okay, so first of all, a common question, and one that has been addressed tonight is, isn't it unsafe for pedestrians if there are bikes on sidewalks? There seems to be very limited research on this in terms of overall looking at bikes on sidewalks and specifically looking at bikes on sidewalks where it is permitted versus not permitted by code. We acknowledge, and I think everyone can kind of tell, that there is a small risk to pedestrians with bikes on sidewalks. Currently, as we've all acknowledged, there are people who bike on sidewalks, and we don't know of any reported serious injuries in Tacoma Park with the status quo. Montgomery County Code requires audible signaling and yielding right-of-way to pedestrians. So that does provide some sense of pedestrians having the right-of-way and bikes needing to be aware of that. And the Safe Roadways Committee suggests bike education to teach people about pedestrian concerns. We actually see this as an opportunity to kind of change the knowledge in the city. There are probably a lot of people right now who don't know that it's illegal to ride on the sidewalks. And so by actually changing the code and moving forward with this, we feel like bike education, there could be outreach, there could be new newsletter articles by the Safe Roadways Committee and others educating people about the dangers of riding on the sidewalks and what they need to do to protect pedestrians when they are on the sidewalks. And isn't it unsafe to bike on sidewalks? As was noted by one of the members of the public, most bike associations do recommend against sidewalk biking, and a lot of statistics do say that it is less safe for the people biking. However, we've also found several bike associations that say there may be appropriate times to ride on the sidewalk. And one study that we found noted that the reason for finding more incidents on sidewalks in the studies that were done may actually be due to inexperienced riders riding on sidewalks, and thus skewing the results a little bit in terms of more incidents for inexperienced riders who happen to be on the sidewalk. And finally, as I noted, the Safe Roadways Committee suggests more education and outreach to help people understand that it is not always safer to ride on the sidewalk.
Right. Why should the code change if it's not being enforced? Well, no use in having a restriction in the city that does not want to be enforced. Having this restriction, if we haven't enforced it to this point, only makes it usable as a point of an inequitable traffic stop, and which are the points that I covered earlier and about the equality, which we're very focused on here in Tacoma Park. It serves as a deterrent to biking for people who are not currently advanced bikers who feel that they're ready to go out on Piney Branch or down Philadelphia Avenue. This creates confusion as to what the law is or isn't, and it creates the inequity. Conclusion and final recommendations. We recommend that the Safe Roadways Committee recommends a change in the code to allow bikes on sidewalks with requirements for an audible signal to warn pedestrians and a yield of the right-of-way to those pedestrians that does not give a bicyclist free license to roll forward as pedestrians are on the sidewalk. We also recommend that we improve bike infrastructure within the city, more bike lanes, make sure that when we do traffic calming measures that bicyclists are taken into consideration. This includes both our lane narrowing and our speed bumps. And we recommend that we increase bicycle education opportunities with bike rallies and other such civic events. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the public. Thank you to the council. Thank you to Casey for putting together a wonderful presentation.
And thank you. I also want to note that if the council has any questions during the work session, we'll be here and are happy to follow up.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll note for the council and for members of the public, the Safe Roadways Committee, all that information is on the city website because Safe Roadways Committee did give us a report a few weeks ago, and I just want to say thank you for that in-depth report, and particularly in taking on and looking at applying the racial equity framework that the city has been moving towards, and doing that. I think you're the first committee to actually come before the council and report on that. So thank you so much for doing that. And it's nice to meet you, Kate, and welcome aboard as the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks. Great. Now we'll move on to council comments. Who wants to go first? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And welcome back, everybody, all my colleagues. It was nice to have a little vacation, but it's also good to be back. I wanted to just take a minute and thank the city manager for the new no parking signs around the crosswalk on Maple Avenue at Ritchie Avenue. It's something that residents had been concerned about because of the close calls with vehicles, and it has been helpful. And I also appreciate the police department has been making sure that the new signs are respected and adhered to. I also wanted to thank the city manager for the new lights being put in today before the rain at the crosswalks, the solar-powered lights to light up the crosswalks on Maple Avenue. I believe they were at Grant Avenue. And I don't know, what are the plans for those being installed at other locations?
I'll answer it very quickly, but we'll go through a little bit more announcement for there'll be a kind of ribbon cutting, et cetera, tomorrow. But it's a test project to see how these work. We're the first in the country, and it's being sponsored by 2 companies from South Korea, and we're really looking forward to helping them test and see how these work. And I'm already really excited about them.
I also thank our gardeners and Mike Welsh for the work he did today on getting that ready for the ribbon cutting. While we were gone over August, participated in a couple of things. The Purple Line groundbreaking. It was great to see that project is now moving forward. I understand it's going to be a number of years before we can actually use the Purple Line, but it's, again, great to see that there's been movement on that in a positive way. And also, right before we went on recess, I had expressed some concerns about the Man Up program, and Mayor Stewart had suggested I needed to understand it better, so I did attend a couple of meetings with Man Up. Of course I listened to the mayor. They are, as I knew, a fantastic organization doing incredible work with the young people in our neighborhoods. And I think it's money well spent. I really appreciate the council's support. And I look forward to thinking about how we can grow that program. I had a chance to talk with several of the young people that have been in the Man Up program for several years now. And not only did I speak with them, but I spoke with people who knew them during that period of time and have been incredibly impressed with the change that people have seen in the young people. And I think even some of our police officers that are here tonight might recognize some of the people as having been problems in the past in the community, and they're turning into strong leaders in positive ways. And instead of talking about things that get you into trouble, they were talking about how to invest in stocks and many other things in a very positive way, how they can help other young people by mentoring them. Great program. I look forward to seeing how we can expand that to where they're reaching more young people in the community and also doing more work with the people that are in there now. And then lastly, I just wanted to do a little call out to anyone in Tacoma Park who has a concern about those members of our community who don't have a home. There are, I know, one woman in my ward who, sleeps on the streets, and I know that there are other people in Tacoma Park that also face challenges, and it's a problem that we're going to address. I look forward to the support of my colleagues on the council and finding a way to help people have better lives. Not that they have to live the way I want them to live, but at least that we make sure that the needs that they have, we can help them to find ways to meet those needs. So if you have a concern, have an interest, would like to participate in finding solutions, please give me a call. You can find my email address and phone number on the city website. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
Just wanted to say that, like my colleague, Councilmember Siemens, I'm glad to be back. It felt, walking in here tonight, a little bit brought back memories of when I was in elementary school. And you come back to school in those days after Labor Day, like in the 5th grade, and it seemed like everybody else in my class had grown over the summer, and I hadn't. But it was always kind of neat to see all your friends and exciting. It sort of feels that way to see my colleagues and folks came here tonight. We had a long line of people, all filled up with lots of things that they had to get off their chest, and it's good to hear all that. That's part of our process, which I love. One calendar thing I want to mention, and that concerns the mayor, who's having her next lunch with the mayor this Friday. I'm sure you're probably going to mention it in any case, but it's all of these lunches with the mayor have been a whole series which runs, I guess, until October, have been in Ward 6 in the Crossroads area for good reasons. And this one's going to be Friday at noon at the El Marinero Comida restaurant on University Boulevard. And turnouts have been pretty darn good. I wanted to comment, as others have, or reflect a little bit about recent events, but this is of a more personal nature. And I would not normally say, well, I want to tell you about what I did this summer. That's not the point of why I'm saying what I'm about to say. But we had, my wife Nancy and I had the chance to join a slew of family members, 5 different households, to rent a really lovely home 300 feet up on the side of a hill in St. Martin in the first week of August that had its own swimming pool, and it was like one of those things out of a magazine. But when you split it up among 5 households, you can pretty much afford it. And so we had a delightful time, and the reason we went there, St. Martin, is because my son-in-law is from St. Martin, and he has a big family, and they all live in St. Martin. I think he has 4 brothers and a sister, and they have lots of kids, so there's lots and lots of cousins and all of that, and there was a big family gathering at this place that we were staying. Very, very exciting. It's a beautiful island, but it is a third world country, and as tourists, we go to places like that, and we stay in resorts or fancy homes that we rent, and it's very easy to turn a blind eye to the fact that this is a third world country, and there's not a lot of what I would call poverty as we think of it, but it's a lot of low-income people there who have limited means. So we've been to St. Martin, our family has for 25, going down there 25 years because of these family connections, and so we know that island intimately. So over the last few days, the last week, we've been observing Hurricane Irma and watching it closely, and as a result, I feel like I've been through a hurricane this week because the eye of the storm passed literally right smack over St. Martin, the island of St. Martin. It's a population of about 100,000 people. It's one of the more prosperous islands in the Caribbean. And a lot of people immigrate from other islands to get jobs there because of the general prosperity. So at this point in time, it was hit with 185 mile per hour winds. And you can see all this stuff on YouTube if you want to. It's absolutely saddening to see this place, this island, be totally wrecked. But and we are still waiting to hear from any of our family members down there. There's no communications at this point in time. We don't really know. We assume that they're fine. Many of the better houses down there are built to withstand this kind of savage weather. But it occurred to me in thinking about it, when we listened to the news about the threat to the state of Florida and the governor of Florida declaring an emergency for that area of the United States and the president of the United States declaring an emergency and encouraging evacuations and people to go to shelters and take care of all these things. And people worry, citizens and property owners worry about flood insurance, that the folks on an island in the Caribbean, they don't have anywhere to evacuate. There is no way to get off the island. And if you did get off the island, you wouldn't know which way to go to avoid the hurricane in any case. So what they do is they hunker down in the basements of their houses. They fill up all the water bottles they can with water. They bring in all the stuff that's outside that they don't want to blow around. They, get batteries and candles and all the common sense kind of stuff, and they pray, and that's about all that they can do. And when the damage is done, they come out and rebuild their communities. They don't have federal flood insurance or anything like that. They just figure out how to survive, and the island will come back. And apparently, there's been very little loss of life, but the contrast for me between our country and our expectations of what our governments should be doing to keep us from the problems of Mother Nature and all those folks on these little islands across the Caribbean and elsewhere in the world really came home to me in the last few days, not only from a personal point of view, but from a philosophical point of view. I'm not sure what the lesson is here for us all. I'm not trying to preach anything. It's just that this has been a very deeply sad personal experience that I felt like I wanted to share with you so that you would understand what you could not otherwise understand unless you had been able to spend time. And many of the people in Takoma Park, because of their work in the State Department or in the Peace Corps, do know these things and do greatly appreciate them. But this is one that's just been brought home immediately to us. And I suspect that by this time next week, we will be dealing with an awful lot of water in our lives here. And it's going to be an expensive proposition for the city of Takoma Park and all of us before this thing is done. So that's all I wanted to say tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a number of things that I'd like to talk about since we've been gone for the last month. You call it recess, but for me, it's nothing but work. One thing, Washington Vintage University is opening their new building, the Health and Professions Wellness Center on Maplewood. It will open September 16th. That is between Flower and Maple Avenue. So if you have an opportunity, I can tell you the time. I don't have the time with me right now, but you could just email me or look at some of my tweets on Twitter, and I'll provide you the time that this grand opening is going to occur. We are going to get a new restaurant in Ward 5. One of the partners in Spring Mill Bakery is opening a West African restaurant. It will be located at 8,000 Flower Avenue. It's the little strip center nearest Erie Avenue. It should open in December. They have not gotten their use and occupancy permit, but I spoke to the owner yesterday, and he is hopeful that will be able to have all of the improvements and receive his final permits by December. Another thing that happened during the recess, I tried to attend the tenant association meetings at Essex House Apartments, and one of the reoccurring issues has been the residents being locked into one cable provider. And that was a deal that the landlord, CPDC, their nonprofit, signed with Comcast. Well, recently I was able to get CPDC to change their way of thinking. And now they are also going to make sure that residents have the opportunity to sign up with RCN if that works out for them. A number of these apartment buildings, especially the larger buildings, landlords sign exclusive contracts, and it's just not right that tenants do not have the same opportunities to save money on cable with competition that single-family homeowners or people that live in the garden-style apartments, the 4-unit apartments. And then finally, as many of you know, I'm now president of the Montgomery County MML chapter, and we had our planning meeting a few weeks ago, and we locked down a number of the guests that will appear at chapter meetings. So I just want to let you know that in September, we're going to have a representative from the county's age-friendly department in Health and Human Services that will talk to the chapter membership. In October 26th, we have Dr. Smith, Superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools. We will have our annual legislative dinner December 14th. That's when municipal officials in Montgomery County get to talk to county and state officials and try to present our priorities to them. Most of the times they shake their heads and enjoy the fine dinners that we purchase for them, but we are hopeful that some of these priorities, like the restoration of highway user revenue, will this upcoming session will finally be put to rest. So those are some of the things I've been working on for the last 4 weeks, and it's good to be back. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome, everybody, back. A few things I wanted to mention. One, when I was away, I happened to be in Boston, and I kind of got in on the tail end of the big rally that took place up there. And folks know, I think, that there were something like only 30 fascist protesters, for want of another term, and something like 40,000 people showed up from the other side. And so the rally ended pretty quickly without that negative message being delivered. But one of the things that I noticed, because I was walking around Boston Common with my wife as it was winding down, and we talked to some of the police there, and the police were very actively supportive of not wanting the negative message brought in. So I just think it's important to understand that I think the police here do a great job along those lines too, and it really can make a difference going forward. I think we're going to need that. I have had some concerns recently. I've mentioned this to senior staff and briefly to the mayor about some of the practices of contractors in the city. In particular, right now, there's an effort underway to make sidewalks in portions of Ward 1 ADA compliant, and I support making them ADA compliant, but I think there's some ways in which the contractors haven't done as good a job as they might have. In particular, there was one incident that arose yesterday, and I think by tomorrow at least part of it will be resolved, but on the same intersection, both portions of the intersection were being redone at the same time, and so that meant you could cross on the other portion, but if you want to come down basically from the Presbyterian Church down Tulip toward Cedar, you had to walk in the street, and I think it would have been better to do one at a time and then the other at a time. So I think the answer here is that we need to find a better way to monitor more strictly the contractors that are doing the work here and plan that out better, which I think requires a more active partnership between the city and the contractors, and maybe more oversight by us as well. I know the mayor has talked about some of the contractors that are used by utilities like State Highway and Washington WSSC, but this also applies to the contractors who work for us directly. A couple of other things I did want to mention. We now have in the state the law allowing for medical marijuana, the use of medical marijuana. I learned, though, recently that, and I don't think there's anything malicious about this, that we still have within city hiring an absolute restriction on marijuana, even if someone has a medical reason to use it for hiring. And I can understand how potentially with police and other public safety kinds of situations we might not want to do that. But I think going forward, I'd like to begin the process of looking into making a change so that for more routine kinds of jobs, we wouldn't have that anymore. Two other quick things on the folk festival, and maybe the city manager could take a look at this. One of the things that's arisen in the past and people have asked me about is when and how widely and how early the parking restrictions for some of these festivals begin to kick in. And I think there have been some instances in which it seemed like, and there may be valid reasons to bring in the heavy equipment and so on, but it seemed as if the restrictions were wider than the area required and starting sooner than one would have thought. And last, there is this question which we've talked about of some of the older style historic lights in the Old Town area. I think 3 of them are out, and it sounds like some additional materials are needed to repair them, but I don't think we want to have that area in darkness now, particularly since the days are getting shorter and winter is coming. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Qureshi.
Was that a Game of Thrones reference at the end there? Winter is coming.
It's going to come really fast tonight.
Yeah, I know, it's getting late. Just a couple quick points. I want to give a shout out to the city staff, particularly the Public Works Director, because the Sligo Mill Overlook Park or playground near my house is really coming together. I did ask about these rose petal looking things because I didn't know what the purpose of them was, but I think that there's some kind of a shade structure, which we need there because it's a very open space. So thank you, and I hope that we can break ground and have some kind of an introduction very soon. So for folks in Ward 3 who are near the VFW, which is where I live, I would definitely check out the intersection of 5th Avenue and Orchard. Yeah, a long time coming. Special kudos to the Pinecrest Community Association and others who are actively involved in it. I would also like to give a shout out to just the candidates, many of whom are here today. It's election season. Many of them are here as private citizens today, but I'm really grateful to see this. I had the opportunity to attend a launch this past weekend, and at least for my position, what I'm really happy about is that it's looking like right now, with the current candidates in place, that we are guaranteeing a woman to be up here seated in the Ward 3 position, which is pretty awesome. We need more women on the council because I think the mayor gets sick of us after a while. But I just urge those who are watching at home, it's not too late to enter the race. You should consider running for any position. The fact that we're going to have contested elections this year in several of the wards is really exciting because I had a really tough time talking to myself and debating myself during the last election. So, and the final thing is I just want to give a special shout out to one of my favorite participants, Arthur David Olson. I see you're wearing new glasses today. They look very nice. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of announcements. Actually, since Councilmember Qureshi mentioned the elections, I did want to mention that I spoken to the folks at CHEER, and unfortunately they're unable to help sponsor voter forums like they had done 2 years ago. So I just wanted to let my colleagues know that, and since there are a number of candidates here, that they're not going to be organizing voter forums in the apartment building. So folks who are thinking and running for city council may think about ways to particularly reach out to those voters and residents. What else? There are two new businesses I want to talk about. Councilmember Smith talked about another one coming. We did a ribbon cutting, Councilmember Siemens and I, at the new Montessori school that opened in Tacoma Junction, right across where the old printing shop used to be, next to Roland's Barber Shop. And it is a wonderful school. Please stop by and visit. One of the teachers is from Bangladesh, and I talked to her for a while. Another she didn't tell me what country, but she's from Africa, and she told me she's married to somebody who works for the city government. I didn't find out who, but I thought that was nice to have this business and the teachers there, and they already had their students coming in, so that was a wonderful event we were at on Friday. Tomorrow is going to be a busy day, as the city manager talked about, with the solar light pilot project that we're doing in the afternoon, and then we're having another ribbon cutting at Taco Work. Taco Work is a co-working space. It's 3,000 square feet on the second floor of 7,000 Carroll Avenue. So, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to mention that that's in Ward 1. I have a previous engagement, so I won't be able to be there, but I met the proprietor of it, and it's a really awesome business, so I think it's really great.
Don't think so. Okay, and then as I was looking through the city manager comments, one other announcement I wanted to make that I didn't see, and apologize if it is here, is that on September 25th here in the auditorium at 7 p.m., we have a deer management expert from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources doing a presentation on suburban deer management. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for the city staff. I know Councilmember Kovar has raised these concerns, and I have as well, regarding our deer population and the staff. We had an article in the newsletter over the summer and has set up for this presentation. So I want to thank you for doing that so quickly. And September 25th at 7 p.m.
And the person doing it is the expert at the state.
Yeah.
And I've heard just rave reviews of the presentations.
Yeah, and they actually came highly recommended by County Councilmember Tom Hucker's office. So thank you so much for getting that person here in our community. Okay, that's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
Okay, I did mention, and this is the solar lighting pilot project tomorrow. And Councilmember Tom Hucker helped coordinate this with Gina Mathias, our sustainability manager, and it sounds really neat. We'll get some press on it, and I just think it's really nice to be able to be a tester of cutting-edge technology. We'll see how it works. But already, one of the things that I've particularly just been very frustrated about is the crosswalks at Grant and Maple, and the light that was on the side, the one street light that we had there was not over the crosswalks. So it was always a dangerous place, and so I think this, at the very least, will be an improvement. There is a ceremony tomorrow at 1. I'm not exactly sure why we're doing a light thing in the middle of the afternoon, and I know some people kind of joke about it, but that's when it is. We work with the folks we work with. And that's how it is to be arranged, but I think it'll be a really nice event. And my understanding is that it doesn't take much of kind of solar power to keep these lights going for a long time. So even on cloudy days, we're going to do just fine. I do want to mention, and there's been some references by council members about some projects and status of projects. Work is going on across the city, both construction projects as well as preparation for a number of items that the council will be discussing over the next couple months. And I've asked that everybody go and make sure that the project directory pages for each of the items is up to date. There's a couple that still need to be up to have some new information on them. But I do want to make sure that you reference them and that residents know that that's by going to the city's webpage under initiatives, the project directory. There's a lot of information about the status of projects and who to talk to if you need more information. I do have a couple things. One is that the $300,000 budget for ADA improvements has been spent for this fiscal year. So 2 months, and it's been spent. We still have $100,000 for ADA improvements along state highways. That'll take a while before we can handle that. But it does mean that the Maple Avenue project is not going to be finished all the way to the city line, which is this year, which is disappointing. As Councilmember Qureshi mentioned, Sligo Mill Overlook Park is almost done. We're looking for a ribbon cutting date, so just want to wrap around with you after this to see if we can lock that in. The Lincoln Avenue sidewalk project, which a number of people have asked about and Councilmember Mayle had asked about, is not fully approved for the construction with all of the, this has like some of the extra project reviews that are out of our hands, and that's not been fully approved. Because we can't do these projects in the winter, it'll be then done in the spring. One of the things I do want to mention is that we don't have any additional staff to work on all these projects. So the kind of really close attention is limited, and we're going to have to deal with that. And it also means it's going to be tough when new projects get suggested. So we'll do the best we can about keeping you informed about the status of projects. But for example, Nima in Public Works, who's wonderful, has like 8 major projects she's working on right now. And, you know, Flower Avenue alone could be one that would keep a person busy. So we're doing the best we can, but we are have a heavy workload. Want to, a couple people have pointed out to me, and I've seen, we've got signs planted where they shouldn't be planted. So candidate signs, folk festival signs, other kind of, these announcement signs should not be in the right-of-way, should not be on city property. The easiest thing to think about is they need to be on somebody's private property with permission of the private property owner. So not in the grass between the sidewalk and the curb, not on a power pole, not on a median. I want to give everybody a heads up, but pretty soon, our neighborhood services team folks are actually pretty vigilant, and so they'll be moving on that. We're very close to putting out the advertisement on the police chief opening. Hope that goes out this week with the opportunity to have some real selection right in the early November range. We did have, and I wasn't able to attend, I was actually vacationing, but a youth focus group to talk about the characteristics of the police chief that they'd like to see. It sounded very nice. I looked at some of the notes that were taken about that discussion. The mayor, the deputy city manager, and several staff, but I think it was 8 high school students had that discussion. And I love to keep hearing these pieces of information, what people are concerned about. It means a lot. Our peace delegate raised the issue of styrofoam cups at the hospital. That has been an issue for some time. I have just signed a waiver to allow them to continue to use styrofoam cups just in some of the patient service areas. They have not used any polystyrene in any of their food service for meals, for purchase in their cafeteria from even before the time that our restrictions took place. But we've not, and they have not found a good substitution for keeping ice chips and that kind of thing available. We have asked that they find a solution quickly, but recognize that it's tough. And if others have some good ideas on how we can work on that, you know, I'd love to make those connections done.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think they should do it because water is consumed by human beings.
I know it's a very important thing. This is a tough balance. I'd like to go and I'd like to mention that we'll be having a Girls Who Code club in the Mac Lab on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. through the school year. And this is an opportunity for, it's mostly middle school and high school student girls primarily, to learn how to do web design and that kind of thing. And it does mean that Mac Lab will not be available for walk-in use during those periods of time. And that was something that the council approved during recess in a discussion. They do a variety of things, yeah. And the apps are more fun. So. Wanted to let you know about the completion of a community legacy project at Parkview Apartments, connecting Parkview Apartments to Opal Daniels Park. And if you go past Parkview Apartments on Maple, you can see the landscaping changes that have taken place. So there's stormwater management improvements, landscaping with native vegetation, really nice rain garden. And then there's stairs up to Opal Daniels Park, including and I had to check on this, a bike runnel, which is a track that you can roll your bike up and down as you go up to the park. And I've already heard that it's being used, and that's nice. One of the things that we continue to try to do is outreach to renters. And we've got a new program on the first Wednesday of each month at 11, an Ask Moses Wild from our housing department Facebook Live presentation. He's had one. It was very successful. He was supposed to have one today. There was a glitch, so it'll be next Tuesday at 11. But from then on, it'll be the first Wednesday of the month at 11. And it's a great opportunity for people who want to ask questions about leases and what are the rules about a landlord entering your apartment and all of those things. It's an opportunity for people to participate in it that are used to that kind of social media form. Also related to tenants, we had a tenant safety summit, and that was both the Housing and Community Services staff and the tenant capacity building team. We had tenant association reps from Hillwood Manor, Mapleview Apartments, Essex House, Victory Tower, and Parkview Tower, all there to discuss safety in their apartments, in their apartment buildings and around. And that's a nice opportunity to make those connections that we hadn't had before. And also in the city, we have a new tenant association, the Flower Hudson Tenant Association. I don't know, Councilmember Smith, have you connected with them? No? Yeah, okay. Oh, that's fun. Okay, well, I had no idea. But that's serving the building at 8240 Flower, 711 Hudson Avenue. We also publicize rental increases. We have rent stabilization, and we have a formula that identifies what's the allowable rent increase. So for the fiscal year for 2018, the rent stabilization allowance is 1.3%, and that's what they generally run in that neighborhood. The library is having some really cool kid author programs in their partnership with Politics and Prose, and some of the names are really big names. So wanted people to go to the library site on the website and go through and see the different times to attend the Kids Author Illustrator Fall Series. And the first one is on Tuesday at 7 p.m. So if you're not at the nominating caucus, you can go to this. We'll have the Margarita Engel, who's the Young People's Poet Laureate, will kick it off, along with illustrator Mike Curato. And then there's a long list of Caldecott honors, et cetera, folks who will be here. And just reading the book titles made me want to go check out these books. So I think this is going to be a great series for the city. A couple final things. Police department was very busy over the summer, and they do a lot, but I especially wanted to let people know their outreach to the community has been a really nice effort and well received. We did start out a little dramatically with the National Night Out, which had a heck of a thunderstorm. Just right there, just right there. But it showcased the hard work of the Explorers group of the police department, the young people that are learning all about law enforcement and community. That's right. Some people got free bikes. There was food given away for some time, even after for a while after the rain stopped. We had officers from our police force meeting with school officials and welcoming new students at the various public and private schools around Tacoma Parks at the beginning of this school year. We had a successful backpack and school supply drive. We had several officers accompanying a group of seniors to the Frederick Douglass House in Washington, D.C. A lot of fun with the Slurpee Justice thing, where if you were caught doing something good, like wearing a bite helmet, you got a coupon for a Slurpee. And the officers, I think, actually had more fun with this one than the kids in getting that. We have been getting the word out with social media, and I think that's been well received, especially by the young people.
I really like the 9 p.m. check your doors and windows.
Well,
it's great.
People need to know. You need to lock your house. You need to lock your car. It's really, really basic. So, we've been trying to tweet that out and say, hey, it's 9 o'clock. Do you know if your doors are locked? It really is important. I do want to give kudos to Captain Rick Bowers, who's ending his acting chief stint, and Captain Dan Frischkorn will resume acting chief duties beginning September 12th. And I wanted to give kudos to Rick Baravecchia of the Neighborhood Services team. He's really impressed me on how he handles difficult situations, frustrated residents, uncomfortable conversations. He handles them remarkably well. People get tickets and they're smiling at him and thinking good things about him. His work has been well received by the Committee on the Environment. I'm just very pleased at how effective he has been. And so I wanted to just give a shout out to him. And there's quick hiring update. We're hiring lots of folks, crossing guard, recreation staff, planning intern, and I think an arts coordinator yesterday. So we're moving right along on our hiring. And I have on my list upcoming schedule of some events. And yes, I forgot the deer management one on there. But we do have the Folk Festival on the 10th, the nominating caucus on the 12th, the Tacoma Park Street Festival October 1st. On October 11th through 14th, the Maryland Municipal League Fall Conference will be taking place in Rockville. So I'm not paying for hotels for that. Also not real thrilled about the agenda, but I know people will be going back and forth, and we'll try to work those things out. Jason and I will actually, in later October, be going to the ICMA conference, City Manager Association conference in San Antonio. October 23rd, Candidate Forum here in the auditorium. October 28th, Monster Bash, and I apparently have my dress from my Renaissance Festival wedding I went to. So I'll be ready. And November 7th, Election Day. So sorry for taking a long time, but it's good to catch up over the summer.
Terrific. Any questions for the city manager?
Yes, I do.
Yep. Councilmember C.
The sidewalk work that's being done on Maple Avenue?
Yes.
Do we have a guess on when that will be completed?
The work that's on Maple Avenue that's through Ward 1 won't be able to be finished until the next fiscal year, so next summer.
Okay.
Was there other work that you were thinking of?
No. Maple Avenue, I noticed they're doing work at, I think, Maple and Tulip.
Right. That part is being completed, but it's not going to be able to go for the next block or so.
Okay, but that will be completed soon?
Yes.
Do you have any idea when?
A lot of it by early next week, because we're really trying. That was the issue that Councilmember Kovar raised. That the way that it was done, ended up having both sides of the street on Tulip, the work happening at the same time. And that's
And then
not good.
Then it was supposed to be finished this week, but the weather's put a
Yeah, so it'll be
damper.
early next week.
So this is going to be so great this, the weather's going to be great this coming week then.
We'll see what happens.
Starting tomorrow. All right, any other questions for the city manager? All right, thank you for that comprehensive update. We have a number of minutes. Our city clerk was very busy while we were on recess. So we have minutes from June 7th, June 14th, the 21st and 29th, and July 12th, 19th, and 26th. I want to just point out on the June 29th minutes on page 4, Councilmember Kovar's name is spelled wrong. Spelled with an E instead of an A. I do read these. All right. We can have them moved all at once, correct? Yes. Who would like to move adoption of the minutes? Councilmember Qureshi, do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Kovar. Any other changes or conversation? All those in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No, we got the minutes gone. All right, now on to our first voting item tonight, or I guess it's really our second voting item. Our first reading ordinance regarding the 2017 city election. Do I turn this over to our city clerk?
Yes.
Okay. And turn on your microphone. Okay.
Okay. All right. So everything in the ordinance, I believe, has been discussed before by the council, so I don't think there are any surprises there. Basically, it lays out when early voting takes place and where, how election judges will be paid. It says that Election Day voting will be here at the Community Center from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We'll, again, be using paper ballots. And I want to note, for council and the public, there is a lot of good information on the website. So if anyone needs information, on the upper right-hand side of the website, there's a link for the city election, and you can get to all the information you need. And if anyone has questions, they can always contact me. So unless there are any, I don't have anything else to say about this ordinance, but if there are questions, I'd be happy to hear them.
Okay. All right. Would anyone have any questions before I ask for this to be moved? Who would like to move the ordinance?
I'll move it.
Oh.
Second.
All right, I got Councilmember Schultz, second by Councilmember Siemens. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the ordinance, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Ordinance moves. Next, we have the single reading ordinance awarding a contract for lobbying services at the county level.
I'll just briefly mention it has been an interest of the council and the staff for some time to have a lobbyist at the county level. We have quite a lot of issues, including tax duplication and how we are represented with the county, and it does require some focused attention. So we went through quite a significant process with a request for proposal. We interviewed firms, and the firm of Alexander and Cleaver had the best proposal, and they have a fixed fee price of $20,000 for this year, and I urge you to pass that.
Questions before I ask for this to be moved?
I just wanted to, only questions are at issue, or can I raise one issue?
You can, please.
I just wanted to address Mr. DeStachio's comments earlier in regards to this issue. I think comments from him, and I've heard from others in the community, are very well intended about how we as a council approach our fiduciary obligation to taxpayer dollars. With that being said, the reason why I'm going to support this and why I agreed with some of my colleagues to proceed down this road of having somebody with county expertise is the mere fact that despite having many county councilmen living within our city or near our city, a critical issue when you're running for city council in Tacoma Park that everybody loves to talk about, which is the cost issue, which is tax duplication. We believe, and I believe, that it's prudent to utilize these funds with expertise from this particular agency, Alexander and Cleaver, that I've looked at closely, because I believe that we need some expertise to intelligently address that issue, not only with the county council, but also in any other avenues that are available to us, whether it be legal or otherwise. So I just want Mr. DeStachio and others that I've heard from, I'm just pointing you out because you're here and you raise that issue very energetically. That I hear you out. I think that it's important for the council to hear about how people should promise that they're not going to do something stupid with your money. I do not find your money to be stupid, and I'm very committed to affordable housing issues as well. But I think this is an issue where we, from a broader standpoint, are addressing this because we want to address tax duplication head on in a manner where we are going to save our taxpayers more money. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I'll bet you.
All right, who would like to move this motion, this
I'll move
ordinance?
it.
Thank you, Councilmember Qureshi. Second, Councilmember Siemens. Any other comments on this? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, we have to do a roll call on that one? Oh, it's a single reading. Thank you. You want to call the roll?
Councilmember Qureshi.
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Kovar. Mayor Stewart.
Aye. Okay. Now we'll move to our discussion of a formation of a youth council.
Do you want to do
I
this?
won't do this. I'll do this one. All right. Thank you. All right. I will say that this is something that the council has been discussing for many years. Even before I was on the council, I know when we discussed as a city the 16 and 17-year-old voting, that this was something that Councilmember Schultz had raised as an important issue. And then over the years, we were looking for ways to really develop and have form a youth council in our city, because we felt strongly that the best ways for a youth council to succeed is if this is something that is formed by the young people themselves who are going to serve on this committee. And so Mr. Gehring, who many of us know in Tacoma Park, who is a science teacher at our Tacoma Park Middle School, and he oversees the Difference Makers Club, and as well as just knows many of our young people in our community, and also helps through Difference Makers run the Snow Angels that are shovel the sidewalks during snowstorms. So after meeting with Mr. Gehring the beginning of last school year and talking about this issue, he has worked with students not just at Tacoma Park Middle School, but some high school students at Blair, at Wheaton, and in our community to come and present us with a draft Tacoma Park Youth Council charter. And so I know a number of my colleagues have had a chance to look at this draft from Mr. Gehring and the young people. Today is our work session to review that, to make any suggestions or changes. Our hope is to have this voted on September 20th and to work with the city clerk to get applications out so that the young people can apply and we can have a new youth council that actually starts at the same time as the new city council. So that is the goal, that's the background, and we can open it up for discussion. And the revised, and I just want to thank my council members for working over the recess so that we could move this pretty quickly and work on it this fall. A number of people, and thank you very much, Councilmember Schultz, for your comments, have already worked on it, and so there's a new updated version in your folders. And it's updated on the website too, is that correct? Yes, and we posted the new one on the website. And for people here, there should be new ones at the table over there if you want to grab them. Okay. So, Councilmember Qureshi, is your light still on?
No, I think it's on from earlier.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
Yes, I'd like to take the time to comment on this, but first I want to express a great debt of gratitude to Mr. Gehring, the science teacher, who has really not sure we would be right where we are on this whole project without him, because he has been the bridge or link, critical link between the city and a whole lot of school kids. And when you're trying to communicate with people of that age, you need to have interpreters, people who adults who can talk and understand and who have won over the confidence of the young people that he knows personally. And I also want to commend our mayor as well for taking the bit in her mouth on this thing and really pushing it to make sure it could happen, because this is just the kind of thing that could always just be delayed another semester. And I voted against the council's adoption of the reducing the voting age for city elections for young people in the age of 16 and 17, primarily, well, for several reasons, but the one that has withstood the test of time. The reason that it was, my reasoning was because I felt like just handing over the right to vote to a certain age group was not doing enough for those people. That I felt like it was a headline grabbing effort to sort of say, hey, look at Tacoma Park doing another forward-looking thing, but we really were not thinking that much about the needs of young people. And my concern, of course, is trying to help young people understand how local government and how democracy works as a part of their education. I think it's an extraordinarily important part of every young person's education in this country. And the lack of it in the United States of America has resulted in getting the president that we have in office at the present time. A lot of people just don't understand reality and about how a democracy and a republic is supposed to work. Now, getting off of that soapbox here for just, and I apologize, is that what I hope we can do with this youth council, therefore, is to help these young people do two things. One, help them to understand how things work, how things get done, how the whole democratic dialogue and the debate and the arguing process works. But also, and probably more importantly, is that so that we here in the city council and city staff can have a real ear for what is on the mind of young people, because these are the people who are going to be on the city council in 10 or 15 years perhaps. And they're going to be maybe many of them staying here in the city and becoming the advocates for so many things that are important in Tacoma Park, in the county, in Maryland, and the United States. And I just feel like, I mean, so many of us are parents, or we're grandparents, or some of us are great-grandparents. But it's very difficult when you become an adult and a parent, to really understand and comprehend what is on the minds of young people. And that's, of course, one of the classic frustrations between generations. I just hope that this committee, this council, can help us in the city be more responsive to the young people. And that's why we've tried to format this council in a way that will be bottom up rather than top down, rather than us telling them, oh, this is what we want you to do. We want it to be a pretty spontaneous process so that the young people who are members of this council will actually feel like that they're empowered to talk to us and to communicate ideas, and so that we can really get some genuine feedback. I personally just don't want this to be an honorific kind of a thing. I want it to be a real committee that we pay attention to. So I think we're working in that direction. I just would add that I think that we need to see this as an experiment, and we're probably not going to get it exactly right when we start here. But once the thing gets rolling, we'll see if there's things that need to be ways that we can help it be a better process than we might have thought with the draft that we're going to approve.
Thank you. Councilmember Kovar?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to also express my appreciation for your work and that of Mr. Goering, who was mentioned. I also want to make note of Ward 1 resident Wayne Sherwood, who was involved in several of the meetings where we coordinated this, and his young friend who grew up here and lives, I think, just a couple of houses outside our border, Tony Hines, who's done a lot of work to try to organize young folks at, in particular, at the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center, but in other areas within the city, too. And I think Tony had a lot of interesting and valuable insights into how the idea of a youth council and youth programs more generally might fit together. And I think they also deserve some credit for where we ended up. And I think more broadly, this is part of what we've talked about a lot and what the mayor and others of us have tried to do in terms of not just having the meetings here, our official meetings here in the community center, but also having city council meetings elsewhere in the city. And to me, even the moving of our elections, all of these things are ways of promoting more engagement among people who live here with our civic and municipal institutions. And I would even include our new and not yet set up council internship program. So I think this is something that really fits together with a lot of the other work that we're trying to do to really make the city a more inclusive place. So I enthusiastically support it.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. Since I joined the council in 1999, I have seen many false starts on this initiative. A number of us have brought this idea up and worked on it for a short period of time, but I would just like to, again, compliment Mayor Stewart and Mr. Goering for the work that they have done to actually bring this to this point. I remember even Kay Daniels Cohen was also advocating for this not so many years ago, but there's been several false starts, but this is a real start, and I thank you, Mayor, and Mr. Goering, and of course I fully support this.
Great. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. I want to echo my colleagues' comments. When I first was elected to the council, I was trying to copy what the city of Baltimore does. They have like an internship program, but it takes a lot of staff time to manage these interns. But I just couldn't figure out a way to do something like that without it costing a lot of money for the city. So I would like to thank the mayor for all her hard work on shepherding this through, and the individuals that helped draft the charter. I first, I guess you can call it, saw a youth council at the National League of Cities conference in D.C. It was really interesting. I thought, how can we get one of those things here in Tacoma Park? But when I went to their conference in Pittsburgh, I was amazed at how knowledgeable these young people are about municipal government. And they're really, really interested in how things work, how we develop ordinances and resolutions. And, I think that's fantastic. If we can get more young people interested early, that's a great thing. The one concern that I have is trying to make sure that our ethnic residents participate in this program, and making sure that we can not just get them involved initially when we set it up, but sustain their involvement. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. I think there were just two places that we still had outstanding to discuss tonight, if I'm right from the city clerk, was under B, number 6, whether or not it was raised by our colleague who isn't here this evening to add subject to the approval of the city council or city manager to how if a member of the youth council has to be removed. Sorry to focus on the negative, but if he or she fails to sustain any of the qualifications, they may be removed by a majority vote of the members, subject to approval of the city council or the city manager. Does anyone have any objections to adding city manager to that?
No, I would actually agree to add that.
Okay. All right. Yes, we get the fun job. And then the only other thing, unless people, yeah, we just add that.
City manager's replacing council or in addition to it?
I thought it was an or.
I thought it was an or. Yeah. So council or manager, yeah. Either one of us could do it. Is that all right? Does that make it too messy for you, Jesse? The other place is on under D, the first meeting. So just to give some background on this, one of the things that I heard from Mr. Gehring is that when the young people were putting this together, they would they wanted to have some type of recognition or acknowledgement when they first started meeting. We don't really do oaths for our committees, so that wasn't, as Councilmember Schultz pointed out, necessarily appropriate. So we were thinking that, what? Food. Well, we were thinking we could have the youth council members attend, and I wanted to add, and be recognized at the first city council meeting in November. So when it's not an election year, they come, they're recognized, and maybe we'll have a reception. And then in election years, members can attend and be recognized at the meeting that newly elected mayor and city council members are sworn in. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah. Good. All right. Are there any other tweaks, changes people would like to see on this? Councilmember Schultz? Yeah.
Or what did we decide about the length of the term, that it would expire at the end? There's something that you and I kind of I had originally thought it would be the end of the school year, but then on reconsideration, it seemed to make more sense to make it a 12-month.
Yeah, make it the year so that the youth council could work on something over the summer if they wanted to, and many times. So, yeah, we can just make it a year, especially since according to the charter, the way it is now, and as you said, we may find that once the first youth council gets together, they'll come back to us with tweaks to this, but that the first week of school is when applications are supposed to open, and yeah, we're supposed to get them going right away.
And we want to get them right away, and we want to give them enough time to accomplish something. And if we obligated them to sort of say, well, school's over for the year, and so is your term, that they'd only have like about 6 or 7 months.
Yeah. And my experience working with young people, and one of my jobs is that when you factor in end of school year, finals, spring break, it's really like the year becomes really, really short.
It does.
So,
it really does. Yeah.
It does. Good. All right. Well, then with that, we will vote on that on September 20th. And I know the city clerk is already working on the application. So.
Yeah, and I would just add to to communicate to the public, this draft is available someplace?
On the city website.
On the city website. If anybody has any thoughts or ideas that where this text could be tweaked, let us hear about that between now and then.
Yeah. All right. So next, we are going to welcome Dan, and I just forgot your last name. I'm sorry. I thought it was going to come to me if I stretched out Dan long enough, but it just really didn't.
My last name is Sonnenklar.
Oh, see.
And it's a tough one.
It is.
No, that's fine.
So we're going now to close our night with a work session on bikes on sidewalks. And so
Great. Thank you.
Dan's
Good evening.
going to set us up for this.
My name is Dan Sonnenklar. I am the city planner here with the City of Tacoma Park. I was here in front of you all about 6 months ago when I had first started, so I'm very happy to be up in front of you all once again. Tonight I will be presenting briefly on the issue of bicycles and wheelchairs on sidewalks. Now, the issue of bicycles specifically on sidewalks has been discussed for quite some time, as outlined in the cover memo in front of you, and no official decision has been made on the issue yet because it raises some problems and issues that are a little bit difficult to address. In the state of Maryland, state law says that riding on bicycles or riding bicycles on the sidewalk is prohibited unless it is allowed by local laws. In both Montgomery County and Prince George's County, the surrounding counties here, it is permitted, but through slightly different mechanisms. In Montgomery County, bicycling on the sidewalk is permitted everywhere unless it is specifically prohibited in a certain area. And in Prince George's County, the county executive has the authority to designate the areas where bicycling on the sidewalk is permitted. So in addition, outside of Maryland, but the District of Columbia allows bicycling on sidewalks outside of the central business district. So the city of Tacoma Park, however, is an outlier here in that bicycling on sidewalks is strictly prohibited on all sidewalks throughout the city. But there is a caveat. This is not actively enforced throughout. So there's already some issues in this very brief presentation, but there are a number of other issues that I think give some more context to this situation. So first of all, under the current city law, cyclists in Tacoma Park are required to travel in traffic lanes or in designated bicycle facilities. This can be dangerous on high-capacity roadways, as illustrated by this photo here. The gentleman in the picture is currently breaking the law. He's legally required to use the road just to the left of him, but I'm not sure that I would in that situation either. The current rules protect pedestrians along the sidewalks from conflicts with cyclists, which is an important aspect of this law, but it puts these cyclists in the path of significant danger with conflicts and vehicles. So in situations like the one we saw, there are approved plans throughout the city that call for installing separated, protected, and demarcated bicycle infrastructure in areas where it has been deemed appropriate. This is the case on New Hampshire Avenue and in various other parts of the city. And no matter what is decided on this legal issue, the city should and can continue to advocate for these kinds of solutions in long-term planning contexts. However, this takes time. So even looking at the short term, or rather, even with patience, taking into account that those changes can be made over long periods of time with long-range planning, there are significant challenges. One is that that state ownership of major roadways limits what the city can change or how they can influence change on those roadways, and with things like lane alignments to accommodate bicycles in the right-of-way. Unfortunately, the city does not control a lot of these roadways, the particularly difficult ones for bicyclists. Those are the higher capacity, higher speed roadways throughout the city, the Maryland State Highways. The state ultimately has the say over the design for almost all of these, and they have their own prioritization and design processes that we can influence in the process, but they guide. In addition, when the state eventually does redesign roadways throughout the city, there are narrow right-of-ways throughout the city of Tacoma Park along a lot of these state highways, which makes it very difficult to dedicate adequate space for cyclists within the roadway. Without the acquisition here of more right-of-way, as illustrated here on Philadelphia Avenue, there's simply not enough space for those sorts of facilities. So in the long term, we are recommending, where appropriate, protected, separated bicycle lanes. However, that is difficult to do along all of these roadways. In addition, one other aspect to consider is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, all of the immediately surrounding jurisdictions have a mechanism within their laws that allow for cycling, at least on certain sidewalks throughout their jurisdictions. This is not the case in Tacoma Park, which could create confusion for those cyclists traveling to and through the city. Tacoma Park provides a key connection between three major jurisdictions in the region, and those who travel between jurisdictions, namely bicycle commuters, don't necessarily know where the boundary lines are of the city. They don't know where cycling necessarily is permitted or not on the sidewalks, and they simply don't know when they're breaking the law because of that. In the same legal realm, there is a update to Maryland state law that comes into effect in October of this year, where they will be providing more protections for cyclists who use crosswalks. This won't apply to Tacoma Park because there are no crosswalks or sidewalks in Tacoma Park that allow for bicycling. The update to the law only grants the right-of-way to cyclists riding through a crosswalk for those sidewalks that do permit it. And so this can create another issue of confusion for bicyclists who, when incidents happen, will not know who has the right-of-way and how to make that claim. So when looking at this issue from a safety and a planning perspective, there are conflicting opinions on whether this should be allowed or not in general, but also in the city of Tacoma Park. Some positive aspects of allowing bicycling on the sidewalk. We heard many of them earlier with the earlier presentation, but I've included a few here. One being that cyclists would legally be allowed to avoid dangerous vehicular conflicts on particular stretches of roadway, which can induce more cycling. Cyclists would also be able to avoid that confusion of conflicting rules and determination of rights of way with surrounding jurisdictions. And this would provide a safe option for younger riders, none of which below a certain age should be in the right-of-way. Some downsides to permitting it, as demonstrated by research. Riding on the sidewalk can make bicyclists invisible or less visible to motorists who don't expect them to cross crosswalks and intersections because they did not see them on the sidewalk beforehand.
Don't see them on the street, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're
cross
looking
section,
for,
yes.
they're looking at the street, and
Exactly.
so that's the reason that so many of the studies show that it's very dangerous for bicyclists.
And this is particularly a problem when motorists are taking a right turn and they don't see the bicyclists coming on the right side on the sidewalk. Allowing this would make cyclists feel safer because they would be allowed to avoid those conflicts with automobiles, but it could make pedestrians feel less secure in certain areas. And as far as best practices go in general, bicycling on sidewalks is not generally recommended in areas of high pedestrian flow, especially if there are other options available. In this city, there are not always other options available. So some things to keep in mind when discussing this. I've outlined here 3 points. One is that there's not one fix for all circumstances. Research does not indicate total support or opposition to biking on sidewalks. The second is that allowing biking on sidewalks is not ideal, but it can give cyclists a safer option, especially on those higher speed, higher capacity roadways. And finally, allowing bicyclists on the sidewalks under certain circumstances, at least, might just be a growing pain for our city. It may be a necessity to ensure that the safety of riders until a better solution is viable in other circumstances. As far as wheelchairs on sidewalks, I'm not dedicating much time to it because it's pretty straightforward. Currently, city code does not accommodate wheelchairs or other mobility devices on the sidewalks. This provision is not enforced by the police. Those that use wheelchairs or mobility devices are not ticketed. But since this is currently in conflict with federal accessibility guidelines and laws, the council should update the code to reflect accommodations throughout the city. So in front of you, you have the cover memo, which outlines a number of different policy options to address more specifically the issue of bicycles on sidewalks. From a planning perspective, staff does recommend paying attention to numbers 1, 2, and 3, which would allow for a mechanism for the city to allow biking on sidewalks in certain situations. And with that, I thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks. And I'd like to, go back to the situation that the city has, which is that we have very narrow rights of way. And that also means that our sidewalks are narrow. And so none of this, everything that we choose could make somebody feel unsafe, each of these various options. I think that, as Dan mentioned, we want to make sure that we're moving towards an opportunity for bike lanes that are special facilities so that bicyclists can ride on the street in a protected way. And that's my goal. The other thing that we do when we do bike planning is also sometimes to identify you might not have to ride on the main street. You go on a side street that's parallel. That's often, and that's, bikers often do that. They have their routes that they figure it goes. I do think there's some good questions here. I think the statistics, I think, are clear that, at least for adults, biking in the street is safer for bikers, for the bicyclists. There's, most people like to have their kids on the sidewalk, but that's usually not high speed. It's often with somebody else around keeping their eyes open for them. So I think there's a variety of options here. I'm not sure, Mayor, how you want to go through this in terms of hand votes or some direction so that we know what we're doing when we go back and come back to this item. It's in 2 weeks, I think, right?
In September 20th.
Yes.
So we're going to bring this back on September 20th as well to vote on. We'll have 2 readings of this. And so I think the goal for this evening, since as we discussed is on your cover sheet, we've had a number of work sessions on this, and actually I think our first work session actually preceded you, and was with the person who had your job before you. But tonight is really to take a hand vote to indicate a direction we want to go in. And so if you look on your agenda item, in the back, there's the top part, requirements for riding on sidewalks. Councilmember Mail had marked this up for us. The red would strike what's currently in our city code to deal with the issue of the wheelchairs and some odd arcane language that was left in there. So the top section would allow bicycles on sidewalks with the suggestion of adding F or G, which we discussed on March 1st, the last time we had a work session on this. F would have this actually expire on a certain date in 2 years.
So it would be kind of a pilot.
Pilot. And then we would have to, the council at that time would have to actually go through this process again and say whether or not they wanted bikes on sidewalk. G talks about acknowledging that permitting bikes on sidewalks can create safety issues that might not exist otherwise, and that the council will review the impact of this section on or about, again, in 2 years to decide whether to repeal or amend it as appropriate. So it wouldn't just expire, but there'd be opportunity for the council in 2 years to review it. So that's the top section. So we'll first figure out if that's the direction we want to go with on bikes on sidewalks. The other options that are here were raised by Councilmember Qureshi the last time we talked about it. A allows children under the ages 12 and younger to ride on sidewalks. B could be in addition to this or on its own to allow someone to ride a bicycle on sidewalk, and to leave that up to the city manager's judgment, which I'm sure she'll love. And C is that no person shall ride any bicycle on a sidewalk except within 20 feet of the Capitol bike share stations, to just make it clear to people that they can get on and off their bikes near the bike stations. So I know that's a lot, but does that make sense how we want to go? And so I think we'll just open it up for discussion for a little bit and then do a hand vote on a direction so that then the city staff can prepare what we're going to vote on the 20th, and then we'll actually vote on it on the 20th. Okay? Councilmember Schultz, you were first.
I had a question that I wanted to ask. While we know that Montgomery and Prince George's counties permit that, bicycles on sidewalks, do we know whether there's any municipalities in either of those two counties that prohibit bicycles?
So at this point, I do not know of municipalities in Montgomery or Prince George's that prohibit or allow it. We can look into laws, say, in Rockville and those that do control those kinds of aspects of their transportation process. But at this time, we have not collected that research yet.
Gaithersburg just voted on it to allow bikes on sidewalks within the last, 6 months, 3 months.
So prior to that, they had a prohibited.
Yeah, I think they were like where we were, yeah.
Yeah.
So even if they didn't prohibit it explicitly, Maryland state law prohibits it unless it's explicitly permitted by the county or the city.
So
law.
right now, we're in concurrence with state law?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, just to be clear, thank you. Yeah, just, the reason I mentioned it is that, there's other small municipalities of our size around that we might look at for these compromises, but I'm not going to ask explicitly that we do that. I just was curious to see if maybe we had some of that information already.
It's certainly something we can look into.
Okay.
Anything else, Councilmember Schultz?
Well, I'll come back.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to say I appreciate the thoughtful comments brought to us by members of the public who were here tonight and from the committee. Appreciate all the work that's been put into this. As you have indicated, this is not an easy issue. There aren't obvious good answers in some areas. I'd just like to run down a couple of things that are kind of easier. I think age was brought up, and I think that the way it was described, I believe it was Mr. Qureshi's suggestion in A on the list we have before us to say that riders 12 years or younger and with wheels of bicycle less than 26 inches in diameter seems to be a good way to define that. So I would say that if we do limit bicycle riding on sidewalks to any degree, that this should be included in some way so that the young people can ride on the sidewalks. And obviously wheelchairs, I think everyone's agreed that makes sense, whether it's motorized or manual wheelchairs. So that one's an easy one. I think the one thing that was brought up is the riding of bicycles in the business district on sidewalks can be particularly troubling. And I liked the way that was mentioned in Montgomery County that they're permitted on sidewalks except in business district. I think that whether we do that by signage or just by ordinance, that's something that we should include. And again, I see the exception for youth across the board with the smaller bikes and the younger children. And then the one question I had for you, though, is, and it's kind of, I guess there's kind of a question and a comment. We talk about bicycles being allowed in crosswalks and bicycles being allowed on sidewalks. Right now, I believe that the law says that bicycles must adhere to the vehicular law. Now, if they're allowed to ride on the sidewalks and they're allowed to use the crosswalks, is there anything that says that they're having to adhere to pedestrian laws or vehicular laws in crossing the roads when there's signage or signalage saying that that they should stop?
So, as a response to the first question, I'm not an expert on city code. So we do have other people here that may know the city code a little bit more intimately than I do. I do not believe city code says that bicycles must follow vehicular laws. Now, if they're in the right of way, they must.
They're in the
but
roadway.
but bicycles can go off-road. They can go on trails. They can go in other areas. And so the law does not state specifically bicyclists need to follow this rule. It says anybody in the right-of-way needs to follow these rules. And so the same could apply to those using sidewalks. If there are sidewalk regulations that dictate how those interact with and use sidewalks, that would apply to all sidewalk users. And council can certainly influence the language that goes into that code change as well,
Okay.
to ensure that that's the case.
And I'm not sure whether that's something we should consider as part of this, that, again, I think that probably hearing from the police department would be good too, because right now I have a perception that that is not enforced, that I see bicycles, blowing the stop signs and the red lights all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether we want to address
Well,
that or
I mean,
not.
we certainly can talk about that, but on that subject, our officers do sometimes ticket bicyclists that
Okay,
go
if
through
you've gotten
the
a council
sidewalk.
member, I've seen that.
Yes,
so.
we've had that situation before. As he mentioned, when a bicyclist is in the roadway, they have to follow the vehicular laws, and they're supposed to stop. And your question is, does it start crossing lines when you're dealing with the sidewalks? I don't know that it does. We don't have a whole lot of pedestrian
I guess they
walking
get a
laws.
jaywalking ticket if they ride across the
Right.
the crosswalk.
That's right.
Okay, I think that's my questions right now. I tend to support this, but with maybe a couple little changes there for business district and for the young people.
When you said support this, so you are, would you?
Supporting allowing bicycles on the sidewalks,
Uh-huh.
not in business districts.
And just for kids?
Or? But with kids, they could do it anywhere.
And how would you define business district?
That would be defined by the city manager.
Okay. That's I just wanted to, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so just to be clear, you would allow adults on bikes on sidewalks, except for in the business districts, but in the business districts, children could
everywhere.
ride there.
Right. People already get aggravated with kids for doing that, and that's okay, but when an adult, they typically go faster, they're heavier
Right.
weight. And
Right.
so when you walk out of a store and a bicycle runs into you, it's a little more serious.
Okay.
Cool. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. First, let me just say that I support allowing wheelchairs on the sidewalks. Let's get that out of the way. Okay. All right. It's interesting that the other jurisdictions, Montgomery, Prince George's, and the district, they've already gone through this issue. Do you have any calls for service data, whether or not people have been injured on the sidewalk, whether they're pedestrians, bicyclists, so we can get some sense of what happened after they, changed the law?
So we did not collect, we didn't do a full-blown research project for this to collect that kind of data on incidents and injuries. Some national studies have mixed results when it comes to this. And we heard a little bit about that earlier from the earlier presenter, that in certain circumstances and certain types of cyclists may expose themselves to more risk through this, whereas they may be safer off in the street. In the general research that we've done, the results are really split on it.
And I'd like to talk just a moment about Montgomery County.
Okay.
Which has lots of areas with no sidewalks. And the areas that primarily have sidewalks are in new subdivisions where it's much wider sidewalks. So in some respects, it's not an apples to apples comparison. So it's I envision that it'd be much safer to ride a bike on a sidewalk in a subdivision out of Olney, because everything's just bigger there than someplace more closer into downtown Bethesda or Silver Spring or in Tacoma Park. So that, that that clouds how you gather statistics on it. I just don't know if we'd find out information that would be helpful.
Okay. And another question regarding data. Do you know if when the law changed to allow more ridership on sidewalks, did more people start cycling, or did you?
In Montgomery County specifically?
Montgomery,
in other
DC,
places?
yes.
We haven't found data that shows that specifically in this area, but the comment that was made in favor of cycling on sidewalks being a positive in allowing people or attracting more people is that if you create a safer environment for bicyclists, or they feel safer, there may be more of them.
Okay.
And so that research has been shown a lot. Now, separated, demarcated lanes are time and again proven to be the better option.
Protected bike lanes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And-
But in circumstances like on New Hampshire Avenue, for example, it's essentially impossible to bicycle in traffic when there's a lot of traffic there. And so I think that those rules also in the counties were taking into account those older arterials, older commercial arterials that were designed for high traffic flows and in general have low pedestrian activity. We have some areas that kind of have both high traffic and high pedestrian activity.
Right.
So there are some particular nuances in Tacoma Park, but yeah.
All right. So let me just say that I support Councilmember Siemens' proposal and let the city manager figure out the areas where she wants to prohibit cycling. But thank you, Dan, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Qureshi, you're next.
Thanks. Dan, I know you talked about us not having any statistics from the county level, but do we have statistics from Tacoma Park in the last year? How many cyclists have been involved in traffic accidents because they're forced to ride on the street?
Well, I think the causality would be hard to prove. We could easily collect any sort of data on incidents throughout the city, whether those are fatalities or injuries due to or by various different modal users. But to show that it was because they were in the street versus not, it would be a very difficult thing to show with that
Well,
data.
to the extent it's easy for you to get this, I'm not trying to create homework for you, but just an instance where a bicyclist is engaged in a traffic altercation with a vehicle, I'd just be curious to know in the last 12 months how often that's happened. My general thoughts on this is that we should do nothing. I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think you have a police department that is doing the right thing by not writing tickets and hauling off little kids to jail because they're riding their bikes on the street. I think we, from a common sense standpoint, understand that kids are not being criminals when they're riding on the street. But I think
You mean the sidewalk?
or I'm sorry, on the sidewalk. But I think when you create this, where we are now, where we have two votes, it's I'll allow them on the street, but I'll let the city manager figure out where to do it and where to not, I think creates a lot more inconsistency. So we say there's inconsistency between the county, the two neighboring counties and our city, but then we're going to create even greater inconsistency of the law within our own city because cyclists will have to jump off roads onto sidewalks and from sidewalks onto the road. That level of unpredictability, I think, is problematic. I've raised this before to my colleagues. I think this whole concept of driving down the street and wondering if that driveway apron might have a cyclist who's now decided to join the road right in front of you. I mean, that kind of unpredictability is dangerous, and I think it's going to create more legal liability in many different ways because you have different vehicles, for lack of a better term, that are in control as far as they're concerned of the road. So I think that's problematic. Our streets are narrow enough where we can barely get cars going in two different directions, to then add added traffic to our sidewalks. I mean, the Safe Roadways Committee, I really appreciate their work. They were here not too long ago also to talk about traffic calming mechanisms and getting rid of speed humps. What greater traffic calming mechanism than having a bike in front of you that's traveling and can use the entire lane like you can on Philadelphia Avenue? You know, there are points that have been made. I think this major road issue is a red herring argument. Nobody, no matter how skilled of a biker you are, is biking down New Hampshire Avenue to get to downtown DC. It's not happening, and it's not ever going to happen because there are other avenues and ways to get to where you need to get, and you don't need to use these major roads. And if you find yourself at one of those apartment buildings near the rec center or over by where Councilmember Schultz lives and you need to get down New Hampshire to cut to my neighborhood, I think a well-intentioned police officer who knows what to enforce and what not to enforce will think this person is doing what's safe and is making their way down the sidewalk, albeit temporarily. But where you create the hazard, that's when the police officers have their discretion to enforce or not to enforce. And I sort of leave it with one point. I mean, I think we all know that weird turn that we all make when you're at the corner about to make a right turn, and that crosswalk that's running parallel to your vehicle before you make that right turn is operating. And you have the slow man walking from across the street towards you, and you have the person walking just to your right, to your passenger side door, walking towards that slow man. And you want to time your turn perfectly so that you get behind the person who's walking towards the slow man, but you get your car past the slow man, right?
Can we quote you on this?
Sure. The slow lady, the slow whatever. But then you also have to pay attention to, if there's a change in the law, a bicyclist who's going to be traveling faster than a normal walking person down the crosswalk behind you to make it through that light or to make it through that. I mean, you're just creating so much unknown. And I don't see any statistical support that this is a critical need in Tacoma Park. I think this is something that we've just decided that, hey, why not try it out because it's a good thing. But we're creating more inconsistency. And I think that when you have a police department, and, you know, the racial impact argument, I get that. But if there were statistics in front of me saying the police department is going around locking up young brown and black kids because they're riding their bikes on the street and not...
Yeah, that would be a whole different...
That'd be a whole different discussion. There's no evidence of that here. So I think we're trying to fix something that isn't broke. And I think if we want to really make sure that our kids don't, under some overzealous officer's, you know, approach to his or her job, doesn't get a ticket, then I think we should put that amendment in there about that I pulled from the city of New York, that no person shall ride a bicycle on sidewalks unless 12 or younger and wheels are less than 26 inches in diameter. I just think that's the minimum that I would ask, but otherwise I would ask my colleagues to not do anything. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. Good presentation. Thank you for that. I had a few questions that I wanted to just, or clarification. So just to be clear, it would be possible for us to, as the colleagues here have suggested, do something that isn't either allow it everywhere or don't allow it everywhere. There's middle grounds in terms of either making Suzanne Ludlow decide where, or allowing younger people, or restricting it to certain commercial areas, right? We have that ability. It's not all
Certainly.
or nothing, right?
Yes.
So now in PG County, you mentioned that it's up to the executive, and has the executive decide to allow it everywhere, or does the executive pick and choose? Do you know the answer to that?
So this was an interesting question that I was trying to find the answer to, and I cannot find a published map of Prince George's County where it says where it is legal or permitted or not permitted. However, the point that I was trying to make through the presentation was that they have the ability to designate certain areas that are problematic, whereas Tacoma Park currently does not have any ability to do that through the city manager's office or through council. And so, yes.
So that's helpful. So just to follow up on Councilmember Qureshi's comments, I do think before we have a final vote, we ought to know if there have been any incidents here in the city where bicycles and cars have had accidents where the bicyclist has been injured. And I take your point that you can't know for sure if that occurred because the person was in the street. On the other hand, it wouldn't have occurred if he wasn't in the street. So I think it would just be helpful to have that information. And I don't know whether they collect the data that way.
There's a little bit, but there's not been very many incidents, and I think that's been
right.
Yeah.
That's been the issue.
The other aspect of that is that currently bicycling on the sidewalk is not enforced, and so when those that are using sidewalks go into the street, that might be when they experience that conflict.
Right. So one of the things that was mentioned was if cyclists were allowed on sidewalks here, they would be required to yield the right of way to pedestrians. I think that was mentioned, right? What would that mean in practice?
So yielding right of way to pedestrians. So if they are using the pedestrian facility, they would be flowing with pedestrians. But I guess what it would do, from a practical standpoint, what it would do is it would regulate the speed and kind of aggressive biking on sidewalks. It would require that if they are using a sidewalk to be conscious of the pedestrians that are also on that sidewalk.
Well, so I was walking the other day on the Sligo Creek Parkway pathway. I think a lot of people here know, but that's really wide, and so when you're walking on that, you hear the little sound behind, or they say on your left, and they shoot on by. That's wider than the typical sidewalk. And so I'm just trying to imagine, given the typical width, would the cyclists be able to pass by? Would they have to slow down to a crawl? Would they have to go over into the grass strip? And of course, as I've mentioned previously, there are portions of a state highway sidewalk where there's no grass strip and you go right into the street. So really, realistically, what do you think, I know we don't know, but what do you think would happen in those cases?
Yeah, there's so many different circumstances. With very small sidewalks, if there's two people walking in opposite directions, it would be impossible to pass. But what it does is the small sidewalks also make those cyclists slow down. And if they're going to pass, they would likely pass slowly because they have to wait for an opportunity to do so. And they likely would have to interact with that walker or that pedestrian. And so, it will not create a perfect flow. And it can create conflicts between pedestrians and cyclists, which is why the solution is not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that asking cyclists to use those busy roadways is also ideal.
So on the state law, and maybe this is an unknown question also, is a cycle, if a jurisdiction like ours doesn't allow riding on the sidewalks, I assume a cyclist walking their bike through the crosswalk is still protected, right? It's only when they're riding.
Yes, they would be
that they're
considered
not.
pedestrian.
Right.
So is that just an answer to this, that when they're shooting along and then they're ready to cross the street, they could just hop off and walk across the street? Like we learned that when we were in sixth grade when we were riding to school. There were certain spots you had to walk your bike across for safety.
It's certainly an answer. I don't know that it's an optimal answer, especially if we want to create a city that is accommodating for all mode users. Policies like that tend to treat bicyclists as second-class road users because it says that in certain areas you cannot use this mode. And so it's certainly something the city could do. I don't know that it would be, first of all, followed. And second of all, I don't know if it would be prudent to do so.
Mm-hmm. So just a couple of observations, then I just want to comment on the amendment. So the people from the Safe Roadways made a great presentation, but I do think to say it's a deterrent to riding bicycles, but then on the other sheet to say no one knows about it. So if no one knows about it, it's not a deterrent. And I do believe no one knows about it. They may not ride on it just because they don't think it's safe. And I think, I'm concerned also about the safety of pedestrians in terms of their interaction with bicyclists, which is, I think, what Councilmember Qureshi was talking about. And I've mentioned this previously, but there was an article in the New York Times about it the other day, and I can share it with those who want it, by the daughter of my friend from North Tacoma, Jane Clark, who died. I was in D.C., and she was stepping off of a sidewalk in D.C. with the light and was hit by a cyclist and killed. So I know there's also a case that in Maryland that led to this being done, but this all works in both ways, and whatever we end up doing, I think there's going to be a safety concern. I think the wheelchairs are fine. We should clarify that. I think if we do end up having something on the kids, I would add to it, and I don't know whether Councilmember Cressy would agree with this, but for an adult supervising the child riding at more or less the same speed, because I've talked to parents who say they would never actually run and chase behind them or ride in the street supervising their kids. So if it's okay for a kid to ride, if an adult is supervising them, I think that would be okay. And I certainly wouldn't want the riding on sidewalks to occur in the commercial areas, but at this point I'm not convinced that we need it at all, recognizing though that there are many roadways that aren't safe, and we have to try to find a way to address that. Lastly, just on the question of the bike share stations, we could flip that around if we had to and just say it's fine to ride within 20 feet of the there's different ways of clarifying whether we can ride near the bike share station. I guess that's what I'm saying.
And tonight we don't have the wordsmith,
right,
we just
exactly,
have the do, right.
So I'll stop there, thanks.
Okay. I'll jump in because people are going around the second time. This, as people know, as I've expressed, is a difficult decision to make. There are pros and cons on each side, but I think after thinking about it carefully over the weekend, I'm going to come down on opposing bikes on sidewalks moving forward. I think allowing the children, what Councilmember Cressy has put forward, and however we would want to word the bikes, being on your bike on the sidewalk near a bike share station is fine. I mean, I come at it from a couple of different perspectives. I think, listening to Mr. Nugent talk earlier today about people with disabilities, I think we need to make our city safe for everyone to be able to walk. Sidewalks are predominantly for people to walk. And I want to be able to have a city where people can ride their bikes, and we're encouraging that. But I do think our sidewalks are primarily for people to walk and to have everyone feel safe to walk. And that includes kids walking to school, people with disabilities. We spend a lot of money on ADA, making our sidewalks ADA compliant for those reasons. I think adding the variability of people with different bike skills and relying on a biker to make sure that they're looking out for the pedestrian is an unfair situation for the pedestrian. And I also think in doing a bunch of the research, as I mentioned when we did this work session on March 1st, and I know some of these studies are flawed, but it really struck me that there is no bicycle association or organization that actually promotes or endorses the idea of bikes on sidewalks. They will say in worst case scenarios or maybe in certain situations, but that really does tell me that this is probably not great for bikers either. And so I don't think we should have a policy on our books that says it's okay to do something, because then I believe that means that as a city council and as a city, we're actually saying it's okay, and the implication is it's safe. If we are allowing you to do something, then I think the implication is we've thought this through, and this is a safe thing for you to do. So for those reasons, I'm going to oppose it, but support having children be able to ride and near the bike share stations. And the wheelchairs. Oh, yeah, the wheelchairs. And the wheelchairs. Councilmember Kovar, is that an old light?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah, I've listened to my colleagues here, thought about this, and I know where I stand on all of this. I'm not a bicyclist myself, but there's a few things that I understand about bicycling, and that is bicycling in a city, in an urban area, is is understood to be inherently I won't say the word dangerous, but it's fraught with the possibility of danger when you're riding a bicycle on a street with automobiles. But when you're walking, walking is not, by anybody's measure, supposed to be a hazardous process. And so, you know, I think when you buy a bike or you teach your kid to buy a bike, and you're somebody who's like some people we know rides their bike every day, you understand that there's real risks that you take every time you ride a bicycle on a public street. It shouldn't be that way with people who are walking. And so therefore, I really feel strongly that bicycles belong in the streets. They don't belong on sidewalks, except in certain circumstances. A case an example is that we occasionally walk on the Sligo Creek Hiker-Biker Trail, and what's about
10
5,
feet.
how wide is it?
It's 10 feet.
It's 10 feet.
It doesn't feel like it, but
No,
it is.
I would have said it's more like 6 feet, because when you're walking along, talking, where you have a dog or whatever, but you're preoccupied, you don't have eyes in the back of your head, you hear a jing-jing, and somebody says, on your right, on your left, you got to do some very quick calculations, because you got to figure out, well, what is my right and what is my left? And does that mean he's coming on my left or I'm supposed to be on my left? I mean, that may be obvious to a lot of people, but when you think, oh, I got to do this, I don't want to embarrass myself and force this person to have to dismount or go off into the bushes. And so it's no fun. And that's a situation that's designed to accommodate both. With 10 feet, you're supposed to allow it. And I wish that there would be some signs that the Parks Division would put up that cyclists keep to the left, pedestrians keep to the right, so we'd know and wouldn't have to guess which way we're supposed to leap. But that being aside, I think what I would say is that there's 3 kinds of riders. You've got the children, the little ones. You've got all the people who are really skilled riders and go places and think nothing about it. And you got everybody else in between, which would be people who probably ought not either be on bikes or they're just trying to figure it out. They're learning. And those are the people that I think we don't want on sidewalks either. I think that, that it's given the narrow sidewalks or the absence of sidewalks and the narrow streets and the fact that there's so many cars parked on curbs and there's so many hazards, is that it's just crazy to picture people trying to ride, an adult riding a full-size bicycle on some of these 3-foot wide sidewalks that we have, when it's not even wide enough for two pedestrians to walk shoulder to shoulder, much less accommodate a cyclist without having to step off into the grass, which might have dog poop in it or be wet or something like that. So that's sort of the preliminaries. And so what I would recommend is that we keep the law pretty much as it is, restrict bicycles to the streets, but that we empower the city manager to identify specific areas on certain streets, and one of them that's very obvious to me is New Hampshire Avenue in front of the rec center all the way down to Route 410, where we've just put in a ride-on situation. That might be an area where you could designate with signs that this sidewalk allows cyclists, but pedestrian, and you could set up rules that, and with these signs, is that that you could say that pedestrians still have the right of way, and that cyclists in those limited areas for safety reasons do have to be very careful and give precedence to pedestrians at all times. if it even includes getting off the bicycle or something like that. I think there's a certain number of those locations in the city, and I remember Councilmember Mayle talking about that and advocating that approach, and I think it's a good idea because I think it'd be very limited. I'll let others decide where those locations might be. Might be on Piney Branch Road, might be on Philadelphia, it might be on Ethan Allen, or something like that. With regard to the 12 years or younger, I would eliminate the age on that. I would change that just so it's identified by the size of the bicycle. Because to ask a police officer or anybody to guess whether a kid is 12 years old or 13 or 14 or 10, you know, whatever the age, is kind of difficult. And it's easier for a police officer or somebody who says, gee, young man, you shouldn't be riding a bicycle, that bicycle on this sidewalk. So in other words, full-size bicycles would be always prohibited on sidewalks, and the smaller ones, which would be ridden obviously by younger kids, would be permitted. I think if you're going to have a law and you hope to even have a glimmer of hope of enforcing it, you got to make it as simple and clear cut so that it can be realistically enforced. If you know, because otherwise our officers are put in a quandary of thinking, how can I tell how old that kid is? So that's where I would come on that. Otherwise, I would support paragraph A. I would oppose paragraph B. I would oppose paragraph C, except with designated areas. I would probably go with F and skip G, because I think this ought to be something that is definite and that would obligate the next city council to actually take action. And I would make that modification in the A in the blue ink there, to take out the age and just use the bicycle, the size of the wheels as the determinant. And otherwise, I'm okay with the B and C at the bottom as well. That's where I'm in on that.
Okay. Just so I keep track of, and I think I did, but I think it would be helpful to have a hand count on this. So all those in favor of the, and don't wordsmith it yet, just raise your hand, the top portion of allowing bikes, and we're just going to assume we're going to do the wheelchairs, okay?
Yep.
We're going to do we'll do the wheelchairs. Allowing bikes on sidewalk, those who want to move in that direction, please raise your hand. The bikes on sidewalks, the top part. So allowing bikes on sidewalks. It's 2. Okay, so that doesn't pass, doesn't move forward. Now, looking at the bottom, and what I would suggest is, given that we're creeping towards 10:30, is not try and come to a complete decision on this tonight. I think that Councilmember Schultz, you raised an interesting point about whether or not it should be age versus size of bike. I'd like to actually hear our police department weigh in on that. All of the ordinances I've seen in other cities always have age specified and not size of bike, and there's probably a reason for that.
There is a reason for that, and it's because of BMX bikes or
Yes.
trick bikes
Yeah.
that are undersized for the people that use them. And so
I
you
didn't know
can
what they
have,
were called. I was
yeah.
thinking of those bikes. I
You
didn't
can
know
have
what they
a
were called.
25-year-old on a bike that has 15-inch wheels.
Yeah.
And it's an exaggeration. The other one are foldable bikes.
Right. Yeah.
So there's.
Yeah, so, but we could have our police department weigh in on what would be easier. So what I'm hearing from the other folks is that we will look at a draft ordinance that includes A at the bottom, and I think I heard from most people, but we could take a vote on it later when we have it in front of us, that the city manager have some powers to designate certain areas as allowing bicycles on the sidewalks, and see some language that talks about allowing bikes on sidewalks near the Capitol Bike Share Station. Yeah.
Is that persuasive on the supervising adult
I was putting that in the category of maybe having the police department weigh in on that as I
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I don't know if you want to argue it now, but no, I think I would like to hear, like, yeah, I had that there. Is that okay with everyone, that we move forward with that draft ordinance, and then we can have, and Dan, if you have other thoughts on that after hearing this conversation, our police department staff can come back if there's other things you can think
Great.
of.
Yep.
So, and I just want to say again, thank you very much to the Safe Roadways Committee. As I said before, and as some of you know who I saw, this was a decision that I think was not an easy one for any of us on council, and the fact that we spent as many work sessions as we did on this topic, and asked you to go back again and asked the city staff to go back again. I hope it shows that even though we are not going in the direction that the committee had suggested, that the council spent a good deal of time really contemplating and thinking about this issue, and it's because of your good work that I feel like we were able to come to a very informed decision. So thank you for your help on that. Yes, Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. You say that since it appears the council's not going in that direction, I just wonder how much more work we want staff to put into this.
I think it's only to this.
What I heard was that we would come back with a draft resolution but it would also include some, a memo of some kind from the police department on the Blue A question.
Right. Okay.
About, is it an age, is it a size of bike, is it a supervising adult? Are there some recommendations that they might have about that?
Okay, but the rest of the resolution regarding permitting bicycles on sidewalks will be dropped at this point? Or is
Yes, it didn't have.
That's how it will come back to you as a draft.
Okay, without that in there.
Without that, it would have the three bottom.
Okay.
It would have the wheelchairs, and then it would have the three bottom.
Right, because the only folks who voted for bikes on sidewalks tonight were you
Gotcha, I was
and
just trying to figure
Councilmember
out whether I
Smith.
had a second chance.
I mean, well, if you want to try and convince some of your colleagues, I guess when we haven't voted on it, you certainly could.
This is just to give us direction about how to draft an item for your consideration.
Right, when we, this does have to come back for a 2-reading ordinance, so I guess I should not say it's.
Well, that's a question. She was wondering, do you want it as a first reading? Probably, yes.
Yeah, I think as a first reading. I mean, I feel like we've discussed this and. Yeah. I think we can, and the other thing is that we did want to get this done is to have clarity.
Especially
around
before the October
1st
1st thing, if we need to, felt
Yes.
like we acted by then. Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, and we probably need the city attorney to kind of look at it too, so, yeah. Coming back as a first and then a second. Awesome, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Love it, love it.
Okay, everybody out there, this is Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate, coming to you with a few words of peace. Want to tell you that no matter where you go, there's always some good people out there. I got real sick at the end of July, and I ended up in the hospital. And I don't like hospitals, but I was treated really good there. And I also got a bouquet of flowers from the mayor and the city council. And I really appreciated it because I thought that only happens in the movies. I did not think it happened in real life. but it happened. I got a real big bouquet of flowers in a glass vase. And it was really beautiful. It made the whole heart unit smell real pretty. And everybody loved it. So, and I was still able to talk about peace at the hospital, and people were listening. People were listening. We were talking about homelessness, the people on the streets. There were some people on the streets in the woods, and a gang came up and beat them up, and 3 of them landed in the hospital, and they treated them with respect, because at one time they wouldn't even let them in, but this time they did. I was told that by one of the social workers, and she was really good. Her name was Juana, Juana, like in marijuana. That's how I remembered it. And also, when I got back out, they cut my pain medicine in half. And I started going into pain again. I didn't go into any withdrawal, thank God. But I went into pain. And I got help from several of my friends. A lot of my friends were concerned. They called up the insurance company and said, you got to pay for this. And a friend of mine, he paid for it $131 out of his own pocket. His own pocket. And I don't even have any relatives who would ever do anything like that. And he almost didn't get reimbursed when they paid for it. The insurance company paid for it. And we had to talk to the insurance company many times to get them to pay for it. And they did. And that's what happens when you're doing community participation. People start caring about you. You become noticed. You're not just an empty bottle and thrown in the river or anything like that. When you start doing things to make your community better, people start realizing it. And yesterday, I was able to go down to a demonstration. I went down to the demonstration about the DACA Act, about the children, immigrant children who were brought into this country illegally but raised here all their life. What's his name? President Obama, he passed the DACA Act, allowing them to stay in the United States, the DREAM Act. And now President Trump wants to take it all away. He's like the Grim Reaper. He just takes it away, and don't put nothing back. And a lot of people are going to be doing without. So we got to stand up, even if we voted for him and we don't like what he's doing. We still got to stand up and take action, nonviolent action, that is, because once you turn violent, people don't trust you. That's my experience when I see it. I mean, I wouldn't trust somebody with a gun unless it's law enforcement, and I had to. But anyway, they treated me really good. Paramedics treated me good. They even recognize me by name only now. They don't even ask me what my name is when they come to my house. They say, "How you doing, Mr. Loveless?" And I tell them what's happening. So anyway, people out there, you've got to get involved in your community. You've got to get involved in working for peace. You've got to care about your fellow man, and he'll care about you. You've got to care about your fellow woman, and she'll care about you. It's like animal instinct. You go to where the love is. You flee from where the hatred is. You want to do something about the hatred to convert it to love. So remember, work for peace and vote for peace. Love it, love it, love it. Remember, love. Love is the way to go.